And I do now. I mean, now I have good. It was very severely interrupted by COVID. I used to call it the China virus, but he said, do you think you could use a different name? And I decided to do that, because why should we have a problem over that? But I would do that, and they were...
You're a true diplomat, huh?
I became a diplomat for the first time. Well, you know who taught me that? Marco Rubio. He said, let me teach you about diplomacy. Hey, any guy that gets approved by 100% of the votes, think of it, he got liberal Democrats and radical right Republicans to approve him. He's the only one. The next one was like lost 45 votes, right? But he got all 100 votes voting for him. And at first I wasn't happy about it. I said, wait a minute, I don't like that. And now it turns out that the Democrats probably wish they didn't do that. And Marco has been fantastic. Marco, stand up, please. You have done a great job as Secretary of State. He's going to go down as the best Secretary of State. And Scott, and we have Susie, who's the first female Chief of Staff, and she's the best Chief of Staff, too. And I see Howard Lutnick, who I know spoke, and Howard's fantastic. Some of the deals we're doing are great. And I want to pay particular attention because we have Chris. And Chris, you got up and spoke, I think. He's the #1 oil man in the world, because I was going to put Doug Burgum, who's fantastic. I don't know if Doug's here. Is Doug here? Doug Burgum is fantastic. He said, sir, there's one man better than me. And he introduced me to Chris, and he turns out to be. So we're drilling more oil and gas now than we ever have by almost double. Is that right, Chris? And on top of it, we got a lot coming out of Venezuela. So anyway, so we're doing great. The country is just doing great. We have great people. Thank you. And I see other people. We have Steve Witkoff. We have Jared. I got so many people. I'm in trouble because when I go back, they're going to be people with long faces. Sir, you didn't introduce me. I got so many people. And we have a lot of the greatest people anywhere in the world. I know them all. So I won't continue because we'd be here all day.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also know that you're a deal maker, and then maybe coming back to Greenland and Ukraine. What kind of deal in the end do you see between the U.S. And Denmark? Because, you know, I guess you see it now as a negotiation going on, or?
Well, it's costing Denmark hundreds of millions a year to run it. And Denmark's a small country and wonderful people. But, you know, it's very expensive. It's a very big piece of ice. And it's very important. I mean, I don't want to repeat the speech, but it's very important that we use that for national and international security. That can create a power that will make it impossible for the bad guys to do anything against the perceived good ones. And it's a great block for Europe, just like, you know, Denmark was supposed to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. They didn't spend the money. They didn't spend anything, almost. And we'll see what happens. I just say this. NATO has treated the United States of America very unfairly. We never asked for anything. We never got anything. We actually took care of the needs of NATO for years and years, which I felt was always unfair. So I got NATO to pay because they're rich countries. But I think it's time that NATO step up. We're helping them with Ukraine. Without us, I think Putin would have gone all the way. I think we have it. I think there could have been a World War III, if you want to know the truth. If Kamala was elected, or Joe, any one of those, you know, those thinkers, I think you could have ended up in World War III. And I will say Steve Witkoff has been dealing incredibly with. But we're not going to have World War III. We want to get it stopped, but we're not going to have World War III. I think if I wasn't elected, I think that could have evolved into World War III. It was a very, very bad situation. And it still is, but it's not that kind of bad. It's bad because so many young people are being killed.
How close do you think there is on an agreement on Ukraine? I had the pleasure of speaking with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner yesterday. I know they're working hard on it. I know that they're also traveling now. Do you see this very close or still?
Well, I hate to say it. I thought that was going to be so. I settled 8 wars plus. And I thought that was going to be one of my easier ones. Not the easiest. Some I settled in a matter of hours because I'm good at that stuff. You know, The United Nations should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing it, but it doesn't matter. It's got to get done, saving a lot of lives. We're saving millions of lives. With Ukraine, Russia, there's tremendous hatred between President Zelensky and President Putin. That's not good. That's not good for settlements. We know from dealing. There's abnormal hatred. With that being said, I think Russia wants to make a deal. I think Ukraine wants to make a deal. And we're going to try getting a deal done. We're getting, I think, Steve, I think I can say that we're reasonably close. But what happens is oftentimes we'll have a deal with Russia. Russia's set, and President Zelensky will not do it. You saw that when he was in the Oval Office. I was not happy. And then we'll have President Zelensky who wants to make a deal, and Putin doesn't want to make the deal. It's a very difficult balance, and it's big time, and it is, you know, to use a word, it's a bloodbath. It's horrible what's happening. It's a drone war. The drones are killing, you know, thousands of people a week, thousands. We have to get it stopped. So I believe they're at a point now, I'm going to meet with President Zelensky later today. I believe they're at a point now where they can come together and get a deal done. And if they don't, they're stupid. That goes for both of them. And I know they're not stupid. But if they don't get this done, they are stupid. So I don't want to insult anyone, but you got to get this deal done. Too many people are dying. It's not worth it.
President Sisi is sitting on the first row here. He spoke earlier today and also complimented you on the Gaza deal. I think there will be a signing tomorrow. Of course, there are different views on this, but how important do you think this signing is on the board of peace? And do you think this is going to sustain? Do you think we now will see Gaza reconstructed and the billions of US dollars invested?
I do. I mean, I think we have peace in the Middle East. There are some little situations like Hamas, and Hamas has agreed to give up their weapons. Now, you know, they were born with a weapon in their hand, so it's not easy to do. When they were born with a rifle in their hand. It's not an easy thing for them, but that's what they agreed to. They've got to do it. And we're going to know, Jared, over the next 2 or 3 days, certainly over the next 3 weeks, whether or not they're going to do it. If they don't do it, they'll be blown away very quickly. They'll be blown away. You know, we have 59 countries that are part of that whole peace deal. And some of those countries aren't even they're near the Middle East, but they're not in the Middle East traditionally. And they want to come in and take out Hamas. They want to come in. They want to do whatever they can. There's a problem with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we'll see what happens there, but that's a problem. But there are these little flames, but there's peace in the Middle East. Now, had we not gone in and knocked out with those big, beautiful, we just ordered 25 brand new ones, the latest and the greatest, the B-2 bomber. Think of them, they went in there at 2 o'clock in the morning with no moon, no light, no nothing, and every single one of those massive bombs hit its target, 100,000-pound bombs hit its target, every one of them. And then on top of it, from a submarine 300 miles away, we hit the sites with tomahawks, which is an unbelievable weapon. So, you know, we did our job. If we didn't do that, you would have never had peace in the Middle East. And the countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar could never have, and others could never have signed anything because you would have had this dark cloud, and the dark cloud was Iran with nuclear. Iran would, if we didn't take them out, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 months. They were very close to having the nuclear weapon, and we hit them hard. And it was a total obliteration. If they may try again, but they're going to have to try from a different area because that area was obliterated. Incredible thing we did. And because we did that, we were able to make peace. If we didn't do that, I would say, Jared and Steve, if we didn't do that, there was no chance of making peace because the countries I just named and other countries could have never signed off. They were afraid. They were afraid. We had a bully. The bully was Iran, the bully of the Middle East. They used to call it for years. They were the bully of the Middle East. They're not the bully of the Middle East anymore.
Mr. President, I know you even had to change plane last night, so I guess you didn't have much sleep, but I think you're... but your energy is still there. I know you have several bilateral meetings. I know you're also hosting a reception. So thank you so much for coming back to Davos. Thank you so much. It's highly appreciated.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, would you consider a unilateral takeover? U.S. say you won't use force, but how the other means? You say no.
Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be back here at Congress Hall. Hopefully everybody had a good day yesterday and are enjoying it today. It is my real pleasure to introduce Jensen Huang, who is somebody I admire, somebody I've watched, and somebody who has been a teacher to me on the journey of learning about technology and AI. It is amazing watching how he led NVIDIA. And I don't measure myself on comparisons, but I like this one comparison. So since NVIDIA has been public, which was in 1999, same year as BlackRock.
Oh boy.
Okay, no. NVIDIA's total return for its shareholders has been a compounded 37%. Just think about that. What would that mean to every pension fund if they invested in NVIDIA as an IPO? The amount of successes we have with everybody's retirement. At the same time, BlackRock's annualized total return has been 21%. Not so bad for a financial services company, but it certainly pales. But that is just a really great indication of Jensen's leadership, the positioning of NVIDIA, and also it is a great statement about what the world believes in the future of NVIDIA. So Jensen, congratulations on that journey, and I know we have many more years of that journey ahead of us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My only regret was at the IPO, after the IPO, I wanted to buy my parents something nice. And so I sold NVIDIA stock at a valuation of $300 million. The company was at a valuation of $300 million, and I bought them a Mercedes S-Class. It is the most expensive car in the world. They regret it.
Do they still have it?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Good.
They still have it, yeah.
Good. Let me go into the subject matter now, but I just want to say, the debate on AI is about how it's going to change the world and the global economy. Today, I want to talk about how AI can add to the world economy and how AI can increasingly become a foundational technology that everyone in this room can be utilizing, enhancing our lives, enhancing the lives of everyone in the world. And we need to talk about how it's going to reshape productivity, labor, infrastructure across virtually every other sector. But importantly, how it's going to reshape the world, and how can more segments of the world benefit from AI? And how can we ensure that we have a broadening of the global economy, not a narrowing of the global economy? And I can't think of another person who has a clearer view on not just what AI is, but the infrastructure around it, the infrastructure that is necessary to build around it. And because so many of the major hyperscalers are utilizers of what NVIDIA creates, and the whole engagement around the infrastructure around AI, the potential of AI, I think we have a great voice to listen to this afternoon or this morning. So Jensen, once again, thank you. This is his first time here at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I know you have a really busy schedule, so thank you for taking that time.
I appreciate that.
So let me go right into it. Why do you believe that AI has the potential to be that significant engine of growth? And what makes this moment, this technology, different than past technology cycles?
Yeah, this is, first of all, when you think about AI and you're interacting with AI in all these different ways, ChatGPT, of course, using Gemini, of course, using Anthropic, Claude, of course, and the magical things that it could do, it's helpful to reason back to the first principles of fundamentally what is happening to the computing stack. This is a platform shift. A platform is something where applications are built on top of. And this is a platform shift like the platform shift to PCs. New applications were developed to run on a new type of computer. Platform shift to the internet, a new type of computing platform, hosted all kinds of new applications, a platform shift to mobile cloud. In each and every one of these platform shifts, the computing stack was reinvented and new applications were created. This is a new platform shift in the sense that today you're using ChatGPT. It's important to understand that itself is an application, but very importantly, new applications will be built on top of ChatGPT. New applications will be built on top of Anthropic Claude, for example. And so it's a platform shift in that way. AI is really easy to understand if you realize what it can do that you could never do before. Software in the past was effectively pre-recorded. Humans would type and describe the algorithm or the recipe for the computer to execute. It was able to process structured information, meaning you've got to put the name, the address, their account number, their age, where they live. You create these structured tables that software would then go and retrieve information from. We call it SQL queries. SQL is the single most important database engine the world's ever known. Almost everything ran on SQL before now. Now we have a computer that can understand unstructured information, meaning it can look at an image and understand it. It could look at text and understand it. It's completely unstructured. It could listen to sound and understand it, understand the meaning of it, understand the structure of it, and reason about what to do about it. And so for the first time, we now have a computer that is not pre-recorded, but it's processed in real time, meaning that it's able to take the context of the circumstance, whatever the environmental information, the contextual information, and whatever information you give it, it could reason about what is the meaning of that information and reason about your intent, which could be described in a really unstructured way. You describe it however you want to describe it. We call it prompts. But you describe it however you like to describe it. And to the extent that it can understand your intention, it could perform a task for you. Now, the important thing about this is that because we're reinventing that entire computing stack, the question is, what is AI? You're asked, when you think about AI, you think about the AI models. But it's really important to understand industrially, AI is actually essentially a 5-layer cake. At the bottom is energy. AI, because it's processed in real time and it generates intelligence in real time, it needs energy to do so. Energy is the first layer. The second layer is the layer that I live in. It's chips. Chips and computing infrastructure. The next layer above it is the cloud infrastructure, the cloud services. The layer above that is the AI models. This is where most people think AI is. But don't forget that in order for those models to happen, you have to have all of the layers underneath it. But the most important layer, and this is the layer that's happening right now, The reason why last year was an incredible year, frankly, for AI is that the AI models made so much progress that the layer above it, which is ultimately the layer that we all need to succeed, the application layer above that. And so this application layer could be in financial services, it could be in healthcare, it could be in manufacturing. This layer on top ultimately is where economic benefit will happen. But the important thing though, because this computing platform requires all of the layers underneath it, it has started, and you guys are, everybody's seeing it right now, it has started the largest infrastructure build out in human history. We're now a few $100 billion into it.
That's it.
We're a few $100 billion into it. Larry and I, we get the opportunity to work on many projects together. There are trillions of dollars of infrastructure that needs to be built out. And it's sensible. It's sensible because all of these contexts have to be processed so that the AI, so that the models can generate the intelligence necessary to power the applications that ultimately sit on top. And so when you go back and when you reason about it layer by layer by layer, and you realize that the energy sector is now seeing extraordinary growth. The chip sector, TSMC just announced they're going to build 20 new chip plants. Foxconn working with us and Wistron and Quanta building 30 new computer plants, which then go into these AI factories. So we have chip factories, computer factories, and AI factories all being built around the world.
And memory.
And memory, right, exactly. Those chip fabs. Micron has started investing $200 billion in the United States. SK Hynix is doing incredibly. Samsung is doing incredibly. You could see that entire chip layer growing incredibly today. And now, of course, we pay a lot of attention to the model layer, but it's really exciting that the layer above them is really doing fantastically. And now, one indicator is where the VC funding going into. Last year, 2025, was one of the largest years in VC funding ever. And last year, most of the funding went to what is called AI native companies. These are companies in healthcare, they're company in robotics, and company in manufacturing, financial services. All of the large industries in the world, you're seeing huge investments going in to those AI natives because for the first time, the models are good enough to build on top of.
So let's just dive a little further. Obviously, everybody, I'm sure, uses their own chatbot and getting information. So, but you're talking about the dispersion of AI is going to be the key. Let's talk about it, like, go into a little more upside ideas related to the dispersion of it in the physical world. You mentioned, obviously, healthcare is a great example of that. But where do you see the transformational opportunities in areas like transportation or science?
Well, last year, I would say three major things happened in AI, in the AI technology layer, the model layer. The first one is that the models themselves started out being curious and interesting, but they hallucinated a great deal. And last year, we can all reasonably accept that these models are better grounded. They could do research. They can reason about circumstances that maybe they weren't trained on, break it down into step-by-step reasoning steps, and come up with a plan to answer your question, do your research, or perform the task. So last year, we saw the evolution of language models becoming AI systems that we call agentic systems, agentic AI. The second major breakthrough is the breakthrough of open models. Several years ago, was it a year ago? DeepSeek came out.
Last year.
And DeepSeek was, a lot of people were quite concerned about it. Frankly, DeepSeek was a huge event for most of the industries, most of the companies around the world, because it's the world's first open reasoning model. Since then, a whole bunch of open reasoning models have emerged, and open models has enabled companies and industries, researchers, educators, universities, startups, to be able to use these open models to start something and create something that's domain specific or specialized for their needs. The third area manufacturing, this layer on top ultimately is where economic benefit will happen. But the important thing, though, because this computing platform requires all of the layers underneath it, it has started, and you guys are, everybody's seeing it right now, it has started the largest infrastructure build out in human history. We're now a few $100 billion into it.
That's it.
We're a few $100 billion into it. Larry and I, we get the opportunity to work on many projects together. There are trillions of dollars of infrastructure that needs to be built out, and it's sensible. It's sensible because all of these contexts have to be processed so that the AI, so that the models can generate the intelligence necessary to power the applications that ultimately sit on top. And so when you go back and when you reason about it layer by layer by layer, and you realize that the energy sector is now seeing extraordinary growth. The chip sector, TSMC just announced they're going to build 20 new chip plants. Foxconn working with us, and Wistron and Quanta building 30 new computer plants, which then go into these AI factories. So we have chip factories, computer factories, and AI factories all being built around the world.
And memory.
And memory, right, exactly. Those chip fabs. Micron has started.
Where are we going? And these discussions would be incomplete without the President of the United States, the most important leader in the world. We appreciate him here, so let me introduce and welcome back to Davos the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. It's great to be back in beautiful Davos, Switzerland, and to address so many respected business leaders, so many friends, few enemies, and all of the distinguished guests. It's a who's who, I will say that. I've come to this year's World Economic Forum with truly phenomenal news from America. Yesterday marked the one-year anniversary of my inauguration, and today, after 12 months back in the White House, our economy is booming, growth is exploding, productivity is surging, investment is soaring, incomes are rising, inflation has been defeated, our previously open and dangerous border is closed and virtually impenetrable. And the United States is in the midst of the fastest and most dramatic economic turnaround in our country's history. Under the Biden administration, America was plagued by the nightmare of stagflation, meaning low growth and high inflation, a recipe for misery, failure, and decline. But now, after just 1 year of my policies, we are witnessing the exact opposite. Virtually no inflation and extraordinarily high economic growth. Growth like I believe you'll see very shortly our country has never seen before, perhaps no country has ever seen before. Over the past 3 months, core inflation has been just 1.6%. Meanwhile, fourth quarter growth is projected to be 5.4%, far greater than anybody other than myself and a few others had predicted. Since the election, the stock market has set 52 all-time high records. So that's in 1 year, 52 records, adding $9 trillion in value to retirement accounts, 401ks, and people's savings. People are doing very well. They're very happy with me. Since my inauguration, we've lifted more than 1.2 million people off of food stamps, and after 4 years, in which Biden secured less than $1 trillion of new investment in our country. Think of that, $1 trillion, substantially less than that. In 4 years, we've secured commitments for a record-breaking $18 trillion, and we think when the final numbers come out, they'll be closer to $20 trillion of investment. That's never been done by any country at any time, not even close. Just over 1 year ago, under the radical left Democrats, we were a dead country. Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. In fact, the United States economy is on pace to grow at double the rate that was projected by the IMF just last April. And with my growth and tariff policies, it should be much higher. I really believe we can be much higher than that. And this is all great news, and it's great for all nations. The USA is the economic engine on the planet, and when America booms, the entire world booms. It's been the history. When it goes bad, it goes bad. You all follow us down, and you follow us up, and we're at a point that I don't believe we've ever been. I never thought we could do it this quickly. My biggest surprise is I thought it would take more than a year, maybe like a year and 1 month. But it's happened very quickly. This afternoon, I want to discuss how we have achieved this economic miracle, how we intend to raise living standards for our citizens to levels never seen before, and perhaps how you too and the places where you come from can do much better by following what we're doing, because certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way. That's in a very negative way. And I love Europe, and I want to see Europe go good, but it's not heading in the right direction. In recent decades, it became conventional wisdom in Washington and European capitals that the only way to grow a modern Western economy was through ever-increasing government spending, unchecked mass migration, and endless foreign imports. The consensus was that so-called dirty jobs and heavy industry should be sent elsewhere, that affordable energy should be replaced by the Green New Scam, and that countries could be propped up by importing new and entirely different populations from faraway lands. This was the path that Sleepy Joe Biden administration and many other Western governments very foolishly followed, turning their backs on everything that makes nations rich and powerful and strong. And there's so much potential in so many nations. The result was record budget and trade deficits and a growing sovereign deficit driven by the largest wave of mass migration in human history. We've never seen anything like it. Quite frankly, many parts of our world are being destroyed before our very eyes, and the leaders don't even understand what's happening. And the ones that do understand aren't doing anything about it. Virtually all of the so-called experts predicted my plans to end this failed model would trigger a global recession and runaway inflation. But we have proven them wrong. It's actually just the opposite. In 1 year, our agenda has produced a transformation like America has not seen in over 100 years. Instead of closing down energy plants, we're opening them up. Instead of building ineffective, money-losing windmills, we're taking them down and not approving any. Instead of empowering bureaucrats, we're firing them, and they're going out and getting jobs in the private sector for 2 and 3 times what they were making in government. So they started off hating me when we fired them, and now they love me. Instead of raising taxes on domestic producers, we're lowering them and raising tariffs on foreign nations to pay for the damage that they've caused. In 12 months, we have removed over 270,000 bureaucrats from the federal payrolls, the largest single-year reduction in government employment since the end of World War II. Nobody thought that was coming, but we had no choice. To make a country great, you can't have all federal jobs. We've cut federal spending by $100 billion and slashed the federal budget deficit by 27% in the single year. It's going to go down quite a bit more from that. Driving inflation way down from the record highs of the Biden administration. Every month, they went up and up and up. I promised to cut 10 old regulations for every single new regulation, but instead I've cut, actually till this point, 129 regulations for every one new regulation approved. So every time they come in with a new regulation, we do at least 10, but so far it's averaging out to 129, if you can believe it. In July, we passed the largest tax cuts in American history, including no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. We also provided 100% expensing, that's the one they like, and bonus depreciation for all new equipment and capital investments to help companies expand and shift production to America. They are so in love with that. They build a plant, they're able to deduct it immediately, the whole thing, rather than waiting 38 to 41 years in the old days. This is a miracle taking place. Nobody thought it would ever be done by any country, but it's done by us. It was what made my first term the most successful four-year term that we've ever had from a financial standpoint. And now we've upped it. This is a 10-year program, not a one-year program, but you're allowed to deduct everything in 1 year. It used to be 38 to 41 years. With tariffs, we've radically reduced our ballooning trade deficit, which was the largest in world history. We were losing more than $1 trillion every single year, and it was just wasted. It was going to waste. But in 1 year, I slashed our monthly trade deficit by a staggering 77%, and all of this with no inflation, something everyone said could not be done. There were a couple of brilliant people that actually thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing. Now they all think I'm doing the right thing because they can't believe the numbers. American exports are now up by more than $150 billion. Domestic steel production is up by 300,000 tons a month, and it's doubling over the next 4 months. It's doubling and tripling, and we have steel plants being built all over the country. Nobody thought they'd see that. Factory construction is up by 41%, and that number is really going to skyrocket right now because that's during a process that they're putting in to get their approvals, and we've given very, very quick, fast approvals. In the process, we've made historic trade deals with partners covering 40% of all U.S. trade. Some of the greatest companies and countries in the world. We have countries as our partner, too. The European nations, Japan, South Korea. They're our partners. They've gone into massive deals with us, especially on oil and gas. And these agreements raise growth and cause stock markets to boom, not only in the U.S., but virtually every country that came to make a deal, because, as you've learned, when the United States goes up, you follow. It's really become a staple. In America, I've stopped the nation-wrecking energy policies that drive up prices while sending jobs and factories to the world's worst polluters. They are indeed polluters. Under sleepy Joe Biden, new domestic oil and gas leases fell by 95%. Think of that. Then they wonder, why was gasoline going up so fast? The gasoline actually topped $5 a gallon, and some places $7 a gallon, and more than 100 major power plants were violently shut down by incompetent people that had no idea what the hell they were doing. Under my leadership, U.S. natural gas production is at an all-time high by far. U.S. oil production is up by 730,000 barrels a day, and last week we picked up 50 million barrels from Venezuela alone. Venezuela has been an amazing place for so many years, but then they went bad with their policies. 20 years ago, it was a great country, and now it's got problems, but we're helping them. And those 50 million barrels We're going to be splitting up with them, and they'll be making more money than they've made in a long time. Venezuela is going to do fantastically well. We appreciate all of the cooperation we've been giving. We've been giving great cooperation. Once the attack ended, and they said, let's make a deal. More people should do that. But Venezuela is going to make more money in the next 6 months than they've made in the last 20 years. Every major oil company is coming in with us. It's amazing. It's a beautiful thing to see. The leadership of the country has been very good. They've been very, very smart. The price of gasoline is now below $2.50 a gallon in many states, $2.30 a gallon in most states. Then we'll soon be averaging less than $2 a gallon. In many places, it's already down even lower, $1.95 a gallon. Numerous states are at $1.99, numbers that nobody has heard for years. Actually, since my last administration, we got it down to around those numbers. I've signed an order directing and approval of many new nuclear reactors. We're going heavy into nuclear. I was not a big fan because I didn't like the risk, the danger, but they have the progress they've made with nuclear is unbelievable, and the safety progress they've made is incredible. We're very much into the world of nuclear energy, and we can have it now at good prices and very, very safe. And we're leading the world in AI by a lot. We're leading China by a lot. I think President Xi respects what we've done, in part because I've allowed these big companies building these massive buildings to build their own electric capacity. They're building their own power plants, which when added up is more than any country anywhere in the world is doing. I read recently an article in the Wall Street Journal that China's creating so much energy, and they are. I got to hand it to them. But we're creating as much or more, and we're letting them do that. I'm very proud of it. It was my idea. I said, you can't create this much energy. We needed more than double the energy currently in the country just to take care of the AI plants. And I said, we can't do that. We have an old grid system. And I came up with the idea, you know, you people are brilliant. You have a lot of money. Let's see what you can do. You can build your own electric generating plants. And they looked at me. They didn't believe me. All of the names that are, I think, in the room right now, if you want to know the truth, they didn't believe it. And I said, no, you can't. They came back 2 weeks and they didn't have the plant. They said, we thought you were kidding. I said, no, not only am I not kidding, you're going to have your approvals within 2 weeks. I always say nuclear will take 3 weeks. But most aren't going that. They're going oil and gas. They're even going coal in some cases. Because of my landslide election victory, the United States avoided the catastrophic energy collapse which befell every European nation that pursued the Green New Scam, perhaps the greatest hoax in history. The Green New Scam, windmills all over the place, destroy your land, destroy your land. Every time that goes around, you lose $1,000. You're supposed to make money with energy, not lose money. Here in Europe, we've seen the fate that the radical left tried to impose on America. They tried very hard. Germany now generates 22% less electricity than it did in 2017. And it's not the current chancellor's fault. He's solving the problem. He's going to do a great job. But what they did before he got there, I guess that's why he got there. And electricity prices are 64% higher. The United Kingdom produces just 1/3 of the total energy from all sources that it did in 1999. Think of that, 1/3. And they're sitting on top of the North Sea, one of the greatest reserves anywhere in the world, but they don't use it. And that's one reason why their energy has reached catastrophically low levels with equally high prices. High prices, very low levels. Think of that, 1/3. And you're sitting on top of the North Sea, and they like to say, well, you know, that's depleted. It's not depleted. It's got 500 years. They haven't even found the oil. The North Sea is incredible. They don't let anybody drill. Environmentally, they don't let them drill. They make it impossible for the oil companies to go. They take 92% of the revenues. So the oil companies said, we can't do it. They came to see me, is there anything you can do? I want Europe to do great. I want UK to do great. They're sitting on one of the greatest energy sources in the world, and they don't use it. In fact, their electricity prices have soared 139%. There are windmills all over Europe. There are windmills all over the place, and they are losers. One thing I've noticed is that the more windmills a country has, the more money that country loses and the worse that country is doing. China makes almost all of the windmills, and yet I haven't been able to find any wind farms in China. Did you ever think of that? It's a good way of looking at it. They're smart. China's very smart. They make them, they sell them for a fortune. They sell them to the stupid people that buy them, but they don't use them themselves. They put up a couple of big wind farms, but they don't use them. They just put them up to show people what they could look like. They don't spin, they don't do anything. They use a thing called coal, mostly. But China goes with the coal, they go with oil and gas. They're starting to look at nuclear a little bit, and they're doing just fine. They make a fortune selling the windmills, though, and I think really that's one that they wouldn't be surprised if it stopped. They are shocked that it continues to go. They're very friendly with me. They're shocked that people continue to buy those damn things. They killed the birds. They ruin your landscapes. Other than that, I think they're fabulous, by the way. Stupid people buy them. The consequences of such destructive policies have been stark, including lower economic growth, lower standards of living, lower birth rates, more socially disruptive migration, more vulnerability to hostile foreign adversaries, and much, much smaller militaries. The United States cares greatly about the people of Europe. We really do. I mean, look, I am derived from Europe. Scotland and Germany, 100% Scotland, my mother, 100% German, my father. And we believe deeply in the bonds we share with Europe as a civilization. I want to see it do great. That's why issues like energy, trade, immigration, and economic growth must be central concerns to anyone who wants to see a strong and united West, because Europe and those countries have to do their thing. They have to get out of the culture that they've created over the last 10 years. It's horrible what they're doing to themselves. They're destroying themselves. It's beautiful, beautiful places. We want strong allies, not seriously weakened ones. We want Europe to be strong. Ultimately, these are matters of national security, and perhaps no current issue makes the situation more clear than what's currently going on with Greenland. Would you like me to say a few words of Greenland? I was going to leave it out of the speech, but I think I would have been reviewed very negatively. I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power, much greater than people even understand. I think they found that out 2 weeks ago in Venezuela. We saw this in World War II, when Denmark fell to Germany after just 6 hours of fighting and was totally unable to defend either itself or Greenland. So the United States was then compelled, we did it, we felt an obligation to do it, to send our own forces to hold the Greenland territory, and hold it we did at great cost and expense. They didn't have a chance of getting on it, and they tried. Denmark knows that. We literally set up bases on Greenland for Denmark. We fought for Denmark. We weren't fighting for anyone else. We were fighting to save it for Denmark. Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland. and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. So we did it for ourselves also. And then after the war, which we won it big. Without us, right now you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But we gave it back. But how ungrateful are they now? So now our country and the world face much greater risks than it did ever before because of missiles, because of nuclear, because of weapons of warfare that I can't even talk about. 2 weeks ago, they saw weapons that nobody ever heard of. They weren't able to fire one shot at us. They said, what happened? Everything was discombobulated. They said, we've got them in our sights. Press the trigger, and nothing happened. No anti-aircraft missiles went up. There was one that went up about 30 feet and crashed down right next to the people that sent it. They said, what the hell is going on? Those defensive systems were made by Russia and by China. So they're going to go back to the drawing boards, I guess. Greenland is a vast, almost entirely uninhabited and undeveloped territory. It's sitting undefended in a key strategic location between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right smack in the middle. Wasn't important nearly when we gave it back. You know, when we gave it back, it wasn't the same as it is now. It's not important for any other reason, you know, everyone talks about the minerals. There's so many places. There's no rare earth, no such thing as rare earth. There's rare processing, but there's so much rare earth. And to get to this rare earth, you got to go through hundreds of feet of ice. That's not the reason we need it. We need it for strategic national security and international security. This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory. It is therefore a core national security interest of the United States of America. And in fact, it's been our policy for hundreds of years to prevent outside threats from entering our hemisphere, and we've done it very successfully. We've never been stronger than we are now. That's why American presidents have sought to purchase Greenland for nearly 2 centuries. You know, for 2 centuries they've been trying to do it. They should have kept it after World War II, but they had a different president. That's all right. People think differently. Much more necessary now than it was at that time, however. In 2019, Denmark said that they would spend over $200 million to strengthen Greenland's defenses. But as you know, they spent less than 1% of that amount. 1%, there's no sign of Denmark there. And I say that with great respect for Denmark, whose people I love, whose leaders are very good. It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired, there's nothing wrong with it. Many of them, some went in reverse, actually, if you look. Some had great, vast wealth, great, vast lands all over the world. They went in reverse. They're stuck back where they started. That happens too. But some grow. But this would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance, the NATO alliance. The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it. We give so much and we get so little in return. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far, than any other person. You wouldn't have NATO if I didn't get involved in my first term. The war with Ukraine is an example. We are thousands of miles away, separated by a giant ocean. It's a war that should have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did. It's probably breaking news, but it should be. It was a rigged election. You can't have rigged elections. You need strong borders, strong elections, and ideally a good press. I always say it. Strong borders, strong elections, free, fair elections, and a fair media. The media is terrible. It's very crooked. It's very biased, terrible. But someday it'll straighten out because it's losing all credibility. Think of it, when I went in a landslide, a giant landslide, won all 7 swing states, won the popular vote, won everything, and they only get negative press. That means that it has no credibility. And if they're going to get credibility, they're going to have to be fair. So you need a fair press. But you also need those other elements. And I inherited a terrible, terrible situation. If you look, the border was open, the inflation was raging, everything was bad with the United States when I came into office. But I also inherited a mess with Ukraine and Russia, something that would have never happened. And I know Putin very well. He and I would discuss Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but he wasn't going to do anything. I said, Vladimir, you're not doing it. He would never have done it. It was terrible what happened. I could see it happening, too. After I left, I could see it happening. Biden had given Ukraine and NATO $350 billion, a staggering sum, $350 billion. I came in, and just like the southern border, just like inflation, just like our economy, I said, wow, this place is in trouble, meaning our country. All of these things were out of control. But the border was out of control. We fixed it with the strongest border anywhere in the world. And I've now been working on this war for 1 year, during which time I settled 8 other wars. India, Pakistan, I settled other wars that were, Vladimir Putin called me, Armenia, Azerbaijan. He said, I can't believe you settled that one. They were going on for 35 years. I settled it in 1 day. And President Putin called me. He said, you know, I can't believe I've worked on that war for 10 years trying to settle it. I couldn't do it. I said, do me a favor, focus on settling your war. Don't worry about that one. What does the United States get out of all of this work, all of this money, other than death, destruction, and massive amounts of cash going to people who don't appreciate what we do? They don't appreciate what we do. I'm talking about NATO, I'm talking about Europe. They have to work on Ukraine. We don't. The United States is very far away. We have a big, beautiful ocean separating us. We have nothing to do with it. Until I came along, NATO was only supposed to pay 2% of GDP. But they weren't paying, most of the countries weren't paying anything. The United States was paying for virtually 100% of NATO. And I got that stopped. I said, that's not fair. But then, more importantly, I got NATO to pay 5%, and now they were paying, and now they are paying. So something nobody said was possible. They said, we will never go up higher than 2%. But they went to 5%, and now they're paying the 5. They didn't pay the 2, and now they're paying the 5. And they're stronger for it, and they have an excellent, by the way, Secretary General, who's possibly in the room. Mark, are you here? Yes, he's here. Hello, Mark. We never asked for anything, and we never got anything. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago, after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II. We gave it back to them. We were a powerful force then, but we are a much more powerful force now. After I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so today, we have a budget of $1.5 trillion. We're bringing back battleships. The battleship is 100 times more powerful than the great battleships you saw in World War II, those great, big, gorgeous ships, the Missouri, the Iowa, the Alabama. Because I thought maybe we could take them out of mothballs. They said, no, sir, these ships are 100, think of that, 100 times more powerful than those big, magnificent pieces of art that you saw so many times ago, that you still see on television. You say, wow, what a force. 100 times, each ship 100 times more powerful than the big battleships of the past. So that was the end of the mothball story. So what we have gotten out of NATO is nothing except to protect Europe from the Soviet Union and now Russia. I mean, we've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything, except we pay for NATO. And we paid for many years until I came along. We paid for, in my opinion, 100% of NATO because they weren't paying their bills. And all we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease. Number one, legally it's not defensible that way, totally. And number two, psychologically, who the hell wants to defend a license agreement or a lease, which is a large piece of ice in the middle of the ocean where if there is a war, much of the action will take place on that piece of ice. Think of it. Those missiles would be flying right over the center of that piece of ice. All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. What we did for Israel was amazing, but that's nothing compared to what we have planned for the United States, Canada, and the rest of the world. We are going to build a dome like no other. We did it for Israel. And by the way, I told Bibi, stop taking credit for the dome. That's our technology. That's our stuff. But they had a lot of courage, and they were good fighters, and they did a good job, and we wiped out the Iran nuclear threat like nobody can believe. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. That, Venezuela, taking down Soleimani, wiping out al-Baghdadi when he tried to reinstitute ISIS. We did a lot. I did a lot of big things, all perfectly executed. Everyone was perfectly executed. Somebody told me that, a military expert told me, sir, everything you've done has been perfectly executed. I said, I know. So other presidents have spent, whether foolishly or not, trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO and gotten absolutely nothing in return. We've never asked for anything. It's always a one-way street. Now they want us to help them with Ukraine. And let me say, we're going to. I'm really helping, not even them. I want to see, last week, if you saw, it was 10,000 soldiers, but last month it was 31,000 soldiers died. 31,000. That's this room times, the number of people in this room times 30. Think of it. 30,000 soldiers died in 1 month. The month before it was 27,000. The month before that it was 28,000. The month before that it was 25,000. It's a bloodbath over there. And that's what I want to stop. It doesn't help the United States, but these are souls. These are young people. Look like you, look like some of you right in the front row. They go to war. Their parents are so proud. Oh, there he goes, comes back. 2 weeks later, they get a call, your son's head's been blown off. I want to stop it. It's a horrible war. It's the worst since World War II. They keep going, they'll exceed World War II. The numbers are staggering, how many people they've lost. They don't want to talk about it. Ukraine and Russia lost just tremendous amounts. And I'm dealing with President Putin, and he wants to make a deal, I believe. I'm dealing with President Zelensky, and I think he wants to make a deal. I'm meeting him today. He might be in the audience right now. But they got to get that war stopped because too many people are dying, needlessly dying. Too many souls are being lost. It's the only reason I'm interested in doing it. But in doing it, I'm helping Europe, I'm helping NATO, and I've until the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They called me daddy, right, last time. A very smart man said, he's our daddy. He's running it. I was like running it. I went from running it to being a terrible human being. But now what I'm asking for is a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, that can play a vital role in world peace and world protection. It's a very small ask compared to what we have given them for many, many decades. But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us. If we gave them the call, gentlemen, we are being attacked. We're under attack by such and such a nation. I know them all very well. I'm not sure that they'd be there. I know we'd be there for them. I don't know that they'd be there for us. So with all of the money we expend, with all of the blood, sweat, and tears, I don't know that they'd be there for us. They're not there for us on Iceland, that I can tell you. I mean, our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland. So Iceland's already cost us a lot of money. But that dip is peanuts compared to what it's gone up. And we have an unbelievable future in that stock. That stock market is going to be doubled. We're going to hit 50,000, and that stock market's going to double in a relatively short period of time because of everything that's happening. But this is a good example. After giving NATO and European nations trillions and trillions of dollars in defense, they buy our weapons. We make the greatest weapons in the world, but now we're going to make them faster, much faster. You saw that. I put a cap on the salaries. Then I put no buybacks, no stock buybacks, no various other things that they were doing. I mean, they were making $50 million, but it would take them 3 years to give you a Patriot missile. I said, that's not good. My chauffeur can do a better job than that, and he makes slightly less than 50. They make big salaries. If they're going to make those big salaries, they're going to have to produce a lot faster. The good news is we have the greatest equipment in the world. Now we're going to start making it a lot faster. They're going to build additional plants. And all of the money that goes into stock buybacks is going to go into building plants. We're not allowing stock buybacks by defense companies any longer. They're going to build new plants to make Tomahawks, Patriots. We have the best equipment, F-35s. F-47, the new one just coming out. They say it's the most devastating plane, fighter jet ever. Who knows? They called it 47. If I don't like it, I'm going to take the 47 off it. I wonder why they called it 47. We'll have to think about that. But if I don't like it, I'm going to take that 47 off. But it's supposed to be the stage 6. It's supposed to be the first stage 6 plane, undetectable, like our B-2 bombers were undetectable. They flew right over Iran. They were undetectable. And they did their job, and they got the hell out of there. So we want a piece of ice for world protection, and they won't give it. We've never asked for anything else, and we could have kept that piece of land, and we didn't. So they have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember. A strong and secure America means a strong NATO, and that's one reason why I'm working every day to ensure our military is very powerful, our borders are very strong, and above all, our economy is strong because national security requires economic security and economic prosperity, and we have the greatest that we've ever had. Biden and his allies destroyed our economy and gave us perhaps the worst inflation in American history. They say 48 years, I say forever, but I think 48 years is the equivalent to forever. Whether it's 48 years or ever, it's terrible, costing the typical family $33,000. What they did to this country should never, ever be forgotten. It's early, but he has to be rated as the worst president we've ever had by far. The auto pen did much of the damage. The auto pen, he was the auto pen president, because I don't believe a sane president would have ever signed the kind of things that he signed. But now grocery prices, energy prices, airfares, mortgage rates, rent, and car payments are all coming down, and they're coming down fast. We inherited a mess, but we've done a hell of a job in 12 months. Under my most favored nation policy for drug prices, the cost of prescription drugs is coming down by up to 90%, depending on the way you calculate. You could also say 5, 6, 7, 800%. There are two ways of figuring that. But we have a favored nations policy that every president wanted, no president was able to get. I got it, and other nations approved it. And I had to use tariffs in order to get it because they said, no way. In other words, a pill that costs 10% in London costs $130. Think it costs $10 in London, costs $130 in New York or in Los Angeles. And I'd say, boy, that's bad. Friends of mine would say, you know, we go to London, you can buy the stuff for nothing. We go all over the world, we can buy it for nothing. Because basically America was subsidizing every nation in the world because presidents allowed them to get away with it. It became very tough. So when I called up Emmanuel Macron, I watched him yesterday with those beautiful sunglasses. What the hell happened? But I watched him sort of be tough. But he was at $10 for a pill. And I said, Emmanuel, and I have all the big pharmaceutical companies are in total agreement. It wasn't easy, by the way. They're tough, smart. They've been getting away with the scam for a long time. But they gave it up. But they said, you'll never get the countries to approve it. I said, why is that? Because they won't. They always said, we're not paying any more. Get the rest for the United States. So over the years, they stayed the same. We just went up, up, up. And I mean, we would pay 13, 14, 15 times more than certain countries would. So I said, no, they'll approve it 100%. Sir, you'll never get them to approve it. I said, I guarantee you. But I actually started with Emmanuel, who probably is in the room too. And I like him. I actually like him. Hard to believe, isn't it? And I said, Emmanuel, you're going to have to lift the price of that pill to $20, maybe $30. Think of that. That means it's a doubling of prescription drugs. Might be a tripling, might be a quadrupling. It's not easy. No, 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 Donald, I will not do that. I said, yes, you will, 100%. He said, no, no, no. You're asking me to double. I said, Emmanuel, you've been taking advantage of the United States for 30 years with prescription drugs. You really should do it, and you will do it. I have no doubt. In fact, I am 100% sure you're going to. No, 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 I will not do it. Because he has to, in all fairness to him, he has to double or triple. Because the world being a bigger place than the United States, it's not that you meet in the middle. You just have to go up some, and we come down a lot. They go up a little, we come down a lot. So we're at $130, they're at 10. So they may have to go to 20 or 30. No more than that. I said, Emmanuel, you're going to be doubling or tripling? No, no, no. I said, here's the story, Emmanuel. The answer is you're going to do it. You're going to do it fast. And if you don't, I'm putting a 25% tariff on everything that you sell into the United States and a 100% tariff on your wines and champagnes. And that's about 10 times more than what I'm requesting. And you're going to do it. I don't want to go public with it, but you may make me do that. No, no, Donald, I will do it. I will do it. It took me, on average, 3 minutes a country, saying the same thing. You will do it. They all said, no, 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 I will not do it. You're asking me to double the cost of prescription. I said, that's right, because you've been screwing us for 30 years. And they said, we will not do it. I said, that's all right. On Monday morning, we're putting a 25, 30, 50, I gave different numbers for different countries. This is also national security we're talking about. Not fair. We're not going to subsidize the whole world. And every one of those countries have agreed to do it. So one of the biggest things that I've done is the fact that we have now most favored nation. We will pay whatever the lowest price is in the entire world. So our drug prices are going to be coming down by staggering 90%. Again, you could say 1,000%, 2,000%. Depends on the way you want to figure it, but we'll go with the way the fake news likes it better because it sounds, can you imagine a 90% reduction sounds much worse. But drug prices are going to be coming down tremendously in all the nations, and I appreciate them doing it, but they did it. In all fairness, without tariffs, I wouldn't have been able to get it done. After declining $3,000 under Biden, real incomes are up in the United States by $2,000, $3,000, and even $5,000 and more. Home ownership has always been a symbol of health and vigor of American society, but that goal fell out of reach for millions and millions of people in the Biden era because interest rates went up so high. Today, I'm taking action to bring back this bedrock of the American dream. In recent years, Wall Street giants and institutional investment firms, many of you are here, many of you are good friends of mine, many of you are supporters. Sorry to do this to you, I'm so sorry. But you've driven up housing prices by purchasing hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, and it's been a great investment for them. Often as much as 10% of houses on the market. You know, the crazy thing is a person can't get depreciation on a house, but when a corporation buys it, they get depreciation. Okay, that's something we're going to have to think about too. I don't know if too many people think about that. You buy a corporation, they buy 500 houses, they buy hundreds of thousands, they buy 500 houses, they can take depreciation. A person sweats and works and buys one house, they can't. But homes are built for people, not for corporations, and America will not become a nation of renters. We're not going to do that. That's why I have signed an executive order banning large institutional investors from buying single-family homes. It's just not fair to the public. They're not able to buy a house. And I'm calling on Congress to pass that ban into permanent law, and I think they will. One of the biggest barriers to saving for a down payment has been surging credit card debt. The profits are all caused by this horrible precedent. I'm asking Congress to cap credit card interest rates at 10% for 1 year. And this will help millions of Americans save for a home. They have no idea they're paying 28%. They go out there a little late in their payment and they end up losing their house. It's terrible. To unleash innovation and savings and financing, I'm also working to ensure America remains the crypto capital of the world. And to that end, last year I signed the landmark Genius Act into law. Now Congress is working very hard on crypto market structure legislation, Bitcoin, all of them, which I hope to sign very soon, unlocking new pathways for Americans to reach financial freedom. And I did it for two reasons. Number one, I thought it was politically good, and it was. I got tremendous political support. But more importantly, China wanted that market too. It's just like they want the AI. And we've got that market, I think, pretty well locked up. If I didn't do it, you know, Biden was totally against it until before the election when they realized that, you know, there were millions of people voting against him over crypto. And all of a sudden, they loved it very much, but it was too late. They blew it. But it is politically popular, but it's much more importantly, we have to make it so that China doesn't get the hold of it. And once they have that hold, we're not going to be able to get it back. So I'm honored to have done it. Finally, I've instructed government-backed institutions to purchase up to $200 billion in mortgage bonds to bring down interest rates. And I'll be announcing a new Fed chairman in the not-too-distant future. I think he'll do a very good job. See, I gave away some of it. I did give that away. So we have something, got something. but somebody that's very respected. They're all respected. They're all great. Everyone that I interviewed is great. Everyone could do, I think, a fantastic job. Problem is they change once they get the job. They do. You know, they're saying everything I want to hear, and then they get the job. They're locked in for 6 years. They get the job, and all of a sudden, let's raise rates a little bit. I call them, sir, we'd rather not talk about this. It's amazing how people change once they have the job, but it's too bad. Sort of disloyalty, but they got to do what they think is right. We have a terrible chairman right now. Jerome, too late Powell. He's always too late. And he's very late with interest rates, except before the election. He was just fine for the other side. So we're going to have somebody that's great, and we hope he does the right job. Last week, the average 30-year mortgage rate dropped below 6% for the first time in many years. Another major factor in driving up housing costs was the mass invasion of our borders. And I have to say one thing about housing, because nobody ever says this. I am very protective of people that already own a house, of which we have millions and millions and millions. And because we have had such a good run, the house values have gone up tremendously. And these people have become wealthy. They weren't wealthy. They become wealthy because of their house. And every time you make it more and more and more affordable for somebody to buy a house cheaply, you're actually hurting the value of those houses, obviously, because the one thing works in tandem with the other. And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt the value of people that own a house who, for the first time in their lives, are walking around the streets of whatever city they're in, very proud that their house is worth $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Now, if I want to really crush the housing market, I could do that so fast and people could buy houses, but you would destroy a lot of people that already have houses. In some cases, they've mortgaged their house, and the mortgage would be very low, and all of a sudden the mortgage without any changes becomes very high, and they end up losing the house. I'm not going to hurt, and I speak with Scott, who's doing a fantastic job, and Howard, who's doing a fantastic job, and all of my people. And I always say, look, you know, I can crush the hell out of the market. We can drop interest rates to a level, and that's one thing we do want to do. That's natural. That's good for everybody. You know, the dropping of the interest rates, we should be paying a much lower interest rate than we are. We should be paying the lowest interest rate of any country in the world, because without the United States, you don't have a country. I mean, I had a case with Switzerland. We happened to be in Switzerland. Maybe I'll give you a quick story. But they were paying nothing. They make beautiful watches, great watches, Rolex, all of them. They were paying nothing to the United States when they sent their product in. And we had a $41 billion deficit. $41 billion with this beautiful place. Flew over it, isn't it nice? So I said, let's put a 30% tariff on them, so that we get back some of it, not all of it at all. We'd still have a deficit, big deficit. We had 41 million. That's a big deficit. And I said, let's put a tariff on. Different tariffs, different places. You're all party to them. In some cases, victims to them. But in the end, it's a fair thing. And most of you realize that. But we put a 30% tariff on Switzerland, and all hell broke loose. They were calling, I mean, like you wouldn't believe. And I know so many people from Switzerland, incredible place, incredible, brilliant place. But I then realized that they're only good because of us. And there's so many other examples. I mean, us, probably other places, but a majority of the money they make is because of us, because we never charged them anything. So they come in, they sell their watches, no tariffs, no nothing. They walk away, they make $41 billion on just us. So I said, no, we can't do that. So I'm going to bring it up. I still would have a deficit pretty substantial, but I brought it up to 30%. And I guess Prime Minister, I don't think President, I think Prime Minister called a woman, and she was very repetitive. She said, no, 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 you cannot do that, 30%. You cannot do that. We are a small, small country. I said, yeah, but you have a big, big deficit. You may be small, but you have a bigger deficit than big countries. He said, no, 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 please, you cannot do it. Kept saying the same thing over and over. We are a small country. I said, but you're a big country in terms of, and she just rubbed me the wrong way, I'll be honest with you. And I said, all right, thank you, ma'am, appreciate it. Do not do this. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I made it 39%. And then all hell really broke out. And I was paid visits by everybody. Rolex came to see me. They all came to see me. But I realized, and I reduced it, because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to hurt them. And we brought it down to a, lower level. Doesn't mean it's not going up, but we brought it down to a lower level. But they pay now, tariff. But I realized that we have many places like that where they're making a fortune because of the United States. Without the United States, they wouldn't be making anything. Think of it. Switzerland made $41 billion on us. And as she said, it's a small place. And I realized with that, I don't know, it was so, because she was so aggressive. And I realized in that conversation that the United States is keeping the whole world afloat. Many places, I could give you 6, 7 places just in the people in this little area. I know every one of them. They're looking down. They don't want to see me, and they don't want to stare me in the eyes. But they're taking advantage of, everybody took advantage of the United States. But I've been very fair, and I gave them a tariff, and it was fine. But I realized that without us, it's not Switzerland anymore. Without us, it's not any of the countries that are represented here. And we want to work with the countries. We want to work with them. We're not looking to destroy them. I could have said 39, 40%. I could have said I want a 70% tariff, then we make money with Switzerland. But Switzerland would have been probably destroyed, financially destroyed. I don't want to do that. But we should be paying the lowest interest rate of everybody. I hope Scott's listening to this, because we should be paying the lowest interest rate of everybody. Without us, most of the countries don't even work. And then you have the protection factor. Without our military, which is the greatest in the world by far, without our military, you have threats that you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't believe. You don't have threats because of us, and that's because of NATO. One other thing, and I have to say it so importantly, in the old days, and I used to say I'm the youngest in the room. Now I'm among the older. I hate to say it. I don't feel old, but I'm among the older. But I remember not long ago, 20, 25 years ago, when good news came out about, let's say, the United States. The United States had a great quarter. The United States had a great month. All the stocks went up. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Now when they say the United States had a record quarter, it's unbelievable how well it's doing, all the stocks crash because they say, oh no, inflation, they're going to raise interest rates. And they do. Some of these stupid people like Powell, they raise interest rates. And what they do is they stop you from being successful. It used to be when we had a great quarter, a great month, great earnings, great anything, any good news, the stock market went up. That's the way it's going to be. We got to do that again, because that's the way it should be. Now when we have a great month, they want to kill it. Like we did over 5%. People were surprised. We should do 20%. We could do 25%. When we announce good numbers, and the reason is they're so petrified of inflation. And growth doesn't mean inflation. We've had tremendous growth with very low inflation. In fact, growth can fight inflation, proper growth. So we want to get back to the days when we announce great numbers, because we're going to be announcing phenomenal. You know, all these factories that are being built at record, thousands of businesses are being built right now. Remember, $18 trillion is invested. I think the second number is 3. And that was China many years ago. Investments in the country from outside. 18 trillion, nobody's ever seen. And that's money coming in and building things, factories. Thousands of Businesses are being built, thousands. Hundreds of big factories, car plants are moving back to the United States. They're coming in from Canada, they're coming in from Mexico, from Japan. Japan's coming in and building plants here in order to avoid tariffs. They're coming in from China, they're coming in from all over the world. We have more plants being built now, car plants, than we've ever had built, even in the heyday from the 1940s and 50s. And they're bigger. They don't use renovations anymore where they take an old plant, they rip it down, they build a brand new plant, super modern plant. But it's happening at levels that nobody's ever seen. In 2024, the U.S. built less than 2 million new homes, but Biden admitted more than 8 million new migrants. And those days are over. In 2025, for the first time in 50 years, the United States had reverse migration. Boy, that was nice. And these were criminals that were being taken out of our country because they allowed people to come into our country from jails, from gangs, drug dealers, murderers. 11,888 murderers, we've gotten most of them out. And then ICE gets beat up by stupid people from leadership in Minnesota. We actually are helping Minnesota so much, but they don't appreciate it. Most places do. You know, Washington, D.C. is the safest place now in the United States. It was a very dangerous place to walk. And now you can walk with your wife, your kids, right through the middle of the city. Right now, Washington, D.C. is as safe as it gets. It was one of the most unsafe, I had to admit. We sent in the military, the National Guard. Within 2 months, it was great. Within 3 months, it's like a really great place and a safe place and a beautiful place. It's even been cleaned up. The graffiti's gone. The fences are gone. We don't have to worry about fences anymore. All of the places, the grasses are cut and replaced with new grass in many cases. It's all going to happen in the spring. But Washington and D.C. is beautiful again, and it's safe. New restaurants are opening up. They were all closing. Now you can't get into a restaurant. Restaurants in Washington, D.C. are all opening. Memphis also, Memphis, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana. We're there for 3 weeks. We've cut the crime down by 64%. Within another month, we'll have virtually no crime there. We can do that all over. We're going to help the people in California. We want to have no crime. I know Gavin was here. I used to get along so great with Gavin when I was president. Gavin's a good guy. And we're going to, if he needed it, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'd love to see. We did help them a lot in Los Angeles, a lot with the early in my term when they had some problems. But we would love to do it. I will say this, if I were a Democrat governor or whatever, I would call up Trump. I'd say, come on in, make us look good, because we're cutting crime down to nothing. And we're taking people out, career criminals who are only going to do bad things, and we're bringing them back to their countries. But where we've done it, it's been amazing. And we have a capacity to do it at much greater levels. We're cutting illegal aliens off welfare and other government benefits, and I have directed that starting immediately, there will be no more payments to sanctuary cities because they are really just sanctuaries for criminals. They're really protecting criminals, and those are the ones we have to get out of the country. Murderers, drug dealers, the mentally insane. They emptied their mental institutions into the United States. And despite that, we have the lowest crime numbers that we've ever had in the history of the country. Just came out. But equally importantly, we're cracking down on more than $19 billion in fraud that was stolen by Somalian bandits. Can you believe that they turned out to be higher IQ than we thought? I always say these are low IQ people. How did they go into Minnesota and steal all that money? And we have, they're pirates, they're good pirates, right? But we shoot them out of the water just like we shoot the drug boats out. They're not pirating too many boats lately, do you notice? When they go out into those boats, they want to take over $1.5 billion tanker loaded up with oil, and they say, we're going to blow up your boat. They have powerful weapons. You hit the side of the boat, you blow the whole thing up. The insurance companies are petrified, so they say, just give them the boat, we'll give them money instead. And I don't do that. We blow them right the hell out of the water. We see them going out, we blow them out of the water. We don't have any pirates so much anymore. If we do, they won't be there long. We've cut down with the hitting of the boats that are loaded up with drugs, including submarines. Can you believe they actually buy small, they call mini subs, very fast. They're meant for drugs. We've knocked out 2 of them. The Democrats say they were fishing. You have ruined somebody's fishing weekend, I would say. A submarine is not a fishing boat. You don't fish. But we've knocked down drugs by water, the oceans, the sea, by 97.2%. Think of that. And I actually say, who the hell are the 3%? Because I would not want to be piloting one of those boats. We knocked them down, and now we're going to start on land. We're going to knock it all out. The land is the easy part. What we did on sea is incredible, and that's our great military. The situation in Minnesota reminds us that the West cannot mass import foreign cultures which have failed to ever build a successful society of their own. I mean, we're taking people from Somalia, and Somalia is a failed, it's not a nation. Got no government, got no police, got no military, got no nothing. And then we have this fake congressperson who they just reported is worth $30 million. You believe this? Ilhan Omar, talking about the Constitution provides me. She comes from a country that's not a country, and she's telling us how to run America. Not going to get away with it much longer, let me tell you. The explosion of prosperity and conclusion and progress that built the West did not come from our tax codes. It ultimately came from our very special culture. This is the precious inheritance that America and Europe have in common. We share it. We share it, but we have to keep it strong. We have to become stronger, more successful, and more prosperous than ever. We have to defend that culture and rediscover the spirit that lifted the West from the depths of the Dark Ages to the pinnacle of human achievement. We live in an incredible, changing period. It's an unbelievable time, but we have to take advantage of the time that we're in. In our hands are technologies that our ancestors could scarcely have. I mean, they couldn't have even dreamt some of the things that we see today. And so rapidly they're produced. I mean, AI, 2 years ago, nobody ever heard of the term, and now everybody's talking about it. And it can have some very good purpose. It could also have some dangerous purpose, and for that we have to watch out. But some tremendous things are happening because of it. And we're leading by so much. We're doing so well. But opportunities that are bigger and grander than ever before in human history are right before us. It is the pioneers in this room. Many of you in this room are true pioneers. You're truly brilliant, brilliant people. Just your ability to get a ticket is brilliant because you have about 50 people for every seat. I don't know what, that's Larry. Everything Larry touches turns to gold. He made this very successful. But you're in this room, and some of you are the greatest leaders anywhere in the world. You're the greatest brains anywhere in the world. And the future is unlimited, and to a large part because of you, and we have to protect you, and we have to cherish you. I always say we have to cherish our brilliant people because there aren't many of them. So together with confidence, boldness, and persistence, let us lift up our people, grow our economies, defend our shared destiny, and build a future for our citizens that is more ambitious, more exciting, more inspiring, and greater than the world has ever seen. We're in a position to do things that nobody else has ever even thought of before. And many of the people in this room are the ones that are doing it, and I want to congratulate you, and I'm with you all the way. You can do things that nobody else can even think about. So I congratulate you on your tremendous success. And the United States is back, bigger, stronger, better than ever before. And I'll see you around. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This was supposed to be a nice fire chat, Mr. President.
Yes, good. I got set up. No, I did know.
You made the job for the moderator really easy. Thank you, Mr. President, for your speech. I do have a few follow-up questions, if it's okay. Sure. I don't think I should start with Greenland, maybe. I'll start with the economy. The U.S. economy is doing really, really well. But how to sustain this growth moving forward? Because there's always a recession looming around the corner.
Well, you know, the one thing about economies and recessions is sometimes you get hit unexpectedly and there's nothing you can do about it. All brilliant people, but there's nothing. One example was COVID. We had an economy going at levels like nobody had ever seen my first 2.5, 3 years. And then I heard the word pandemic, not COVID. They came up with that name over a period of time. We won't get into that. But I heard the word pandemic. And I had a poll come out that was so strong just prior to that, and I was with the two best pollsters, McLaughlin and Fabrizio, and they said, sir, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, if they came back and ran as president and vice president, they couldn't beat you. And then what happened is the following day, I was told to stay tuned because there's something really bad happening in China. There are bodies laying all over Wuhan, right around that certain building that we talk about. I always said it came from Wuhan. It did come from Wuhan. And they were body bags. We saw it by satellite. And they said, there are strange things happening in China. And so it began. And we ended up with the COVID, and the whole world suffered. We did a phenomenal job. I don't think we got the credit we deserved. We did something that Operation Warp Speed, which some people say was one of the greatest military feats ever. We did a great job. Used our military, used a lot of people. But sometimes you get hit with things, nothing you can do. You get hit with things like that unexpectedly. And we got through it. And when I left, the stock market was higher than it was previous to the COVID coming up. And that was, I called it a great achievement. But things happen, bad things happen. The things that we can stop are wars if we're smart. That we can stop. Those are a matter of being intelligent and having intelligent people on the other side, because wars are the worst of all. Wars are worse than anything. But we can stop wars because that's sort of up to us. But things like dust flying in the air, wherever COVID comes from or whatever comes, sometimes you have to be a little bit lucky. But we are poised to have an economy like no other, not only in this country, but anywhere. And you know, when you hear the kind of numbers that I can tell you that Scott Bessent was with me the other day, and he's looking at numbers. He said, I can't. And that's all he's done his whole life, pretty much your whole life. Scott, you weren't going to be a football player, I don't think. Scott was not that great at football, but he was always good at numbers, right? And he was looking at numbers. He said, I've never seen anything like this. We're poised to do things that no other country's ever done. And, you know, luck, I hate to say it, but we need a little luck. We don't want to get hit by something that nobody could have thought. Whoever thought we were going to hit by a pandemic? You know, when I heard the word pandemic, I said, oh, that's an ancient problem. World War I, they lost 100 million people. It actually ended World War I. A lot of people don't know. The Spanish flu in World War I ended the war because all the soldiers were sick. The soldiers were so sick on both sides, and that war was raging, and they were all dying from the Spanish flu. They were sick as dogs. They couldn't fight. So, you know, you don't know how that would have turned out. But so we do, I mean, subject to that, and I always have to put a caveat in for it, but we're poised to have the greatest growth of any large country, I think any country that there's been. When you look at what's happening in the United States, it's really amazing.
Thank you. One thing that maybe keeps you up at night, I know you don't sleep that much anyway, Mr. President, is the debt. The U.S. debt is high, is now the biggest expenditure on your budget. How to get out of that impasse?
Well, the big thing is growth. I mean, growth is the way. If we grow like this, we go from having at $37 trillion. We go from having high debt to low debt. But we also are cutting expenses, you know, the old-fashioned way. We have extraordinary growth. I think we're going to be growing our way out. I think we're going to be paying off debt. We're taking in tremendous money from tariffs fairly. And again, I'm using them judiciously. Switzerland's a case study. I could have gotten much more. I could have asked for much more. But we're using them judiciously. But I think growth, most importantly, and then cutting costs. Now, if you take a look at Minnesota, $19 billion in fraud and other things. People going to airports, they came into the country, they don't have 10 cents, and they're leaving with hundreds of thousands of cash in their bags. When we get to that, and our DOJ, Pam, and Todd, and all the people that work over there, and all of the people that work in here, I can tell you, Scott Bessent is working on that. It's a priority, right? You have your whole team. We're in there looking for where this money is coming from, how much it is. It could be more than $19 billion. Can you believe that? That's just one state. If we were able to cut out 50% of the fraud, 50%, and we should be able to do better than that, we would have a balanced budget without having to talk about even growth. So we have a lot of options, but we're working very hard on that. That's a big deal. It's not just the protests, the fake protests done by agitators and professional insurrectionists. That's what they are. They're professional troublemakers. But we are looking very strong at the money too in Minnesota and other places.
I think, Mr. President, also the $500 billion invested in artificial intelligence and the frontier technologies last year also were driving growth exponentially in the U.S.
Well, AI has been a big factor. AI is massive. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg showed me a plant where he put it over a map of Manhattan, and it was basically the size of Manhattan. This is not, I said, you gotta be kidding. It's a plant that was miles long, miles wide, very high. I don't think it was high like the Empire State Building, but it was high. And it literally covered most of the island of Manhattan. That's called a big plant. And, when I heard they're going to spend $50 billion building, and I said, if you spend $50 million, you can build a nice little shopping center. If you spend $500 million, you can build a good shopping center. But how do you spend $50 billion? When I looked at this thing, I said, you think you'll be able to do it for that? It's amazing when, some of the plants that I see, and I see them all, and again, so big is we're letting them build their own electric generation. This way we have no problem, and otherwise they'd be complaining. There'd be nobody able to be, we have an old grid system. And not only that, they're going to sell at a very cheap price the excess electricity that they create back into our grid. So that'll solve some problems for certain states that don't have enough electricity.
We also know that on the AI, there is fierce competition between the US as the largest economy in the world, 27% of the global GDP and 5% of the global population, not doing that badly, and China. And we know that competition is very tough on AI. I know you're heading to a state visit to China in April. How do you see the US-China relationship moving forward? Are you able to combine this tough competition with also collaboration?
So I've always had a very good relationship with President Xi and with President Putin. Talk about, the larger powers. But I've always had a very good relationship with President Xi of China. He's an incredible man. What he's done is amazing. He's highly respected by everybody. And I do now. I mean, now I have good. It was very severely interrupted by COVID. I used to call it the China virus, but he said, do you think you could use a different name? And I decided to do that because why should we have a problem over that? But I would do that, and they were.
You're a true diplomat, huh?
I became a diplomat for the first time. Well, who taught me that? Marco Rubio. He said, let me teach you about diplomacy. Hey, any guy that gets approved by 100% of the votes, think of it, he got liberal Democrats and radical right Republicans to approve him. He's the only one. The next one was lost 45 votes, right? But he got all 100 votes voting for him. And at first I wasn't happy about it. I said, wait a minute, I don't like that. And now it turns out that the Democrats probably wish they didn't do that. And Marco has been fantastic. Marco, stand up, please. You have done a great job as Secretary of State. He's going to go down as the best Secretary of State. And Scott, and we have Susie, who's the first female Chief of Staff, and she's the best Chief of Staff, too. And I see Howard Lutnick, who I know spoke, and Howard's fantastic. Some of the deals we're doing are great. And I want to pay particular attention because we have Chris. And Chris, you got up and spoke, I think. He's the #1 oil man in the world, because I was going to put Doug Burgum, who's fantastic. I don't know if Doug's here. Is Doug here? Doug Burgum is fantastic. He said, sir, there's one man better than me. And he introduced me to Chris, and he turns out to be. So we're drilling more oil and gas now than we ever have by almost double. Is that right, Chris? And on top of it, we got a lot coming out of Venezuela. So anyway, so we're doing great. The country is just doing great. We have great people. Thank you. And I see other people. We have Steve Witkoff. We have Jared. I got so many people. I'm in trouble because when I go back, they're going to be people with long faces. Sir, you didn't introduce me. I got so many people. And we have a lot of the greatest people anywhere in the world. I know them all. So I won't continue because we'd be here all day.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also know that you're a deal maker, and then maybe coming back to Greenland and Ukraine. What kind of deal in the end do you see between the U.S. And Denmark? Because, you know, I guess you see it now as a negotiation going on, or?
Well, it's costing Denmark hundreds of millions a year to run it. And Denmark's a small country and wonderful people. But, you know, it's very expensive. It's a very big piece of ice. And it's very important. I mean, I don't want to repeat the speech, but it's very important that we use that for national and international security. That can create a power that will make it impossible for the bad guys to do anything against the perceived good ones. And it's a great block for Europe, just like, you know, Denmark was supposed to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. They didn't spend the money. They didn't spend anything, almost. And we'll see what happens. I just say this. NATO has treated the United States of America very unfairly. We never asked for anything. We never got anything. We actually took care of the needs of NATO for years and years, which I felt was always unfair. So I got NATO to pay because they're rich countries. But I think it's time that NATO step up. We're helping them with Ukraine. Without us, I think Putin would have gone all the way. I think we have it. I think there could have been a World War III, if you want to know the truth. If Kamala was elected, or Joe, any one of those, you know, those thinkers, I think you could have ended up in World War III. And I will say Steve Witkoff has been dealing incredibly with. But we're not going to have World War III. We want to get it stopped, but we're not going to have World War III. I think if I wasn't elected, I think that could have evolved into World War III. It was a very, very bad situation. And it still is, but it's not that kind of bad. It's bad because so many young people are being killed.
How close do you think there is on an agreement on Ukraine? I had the pleasure of speaking with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner yesterday. I know they're working hard on it. I know that they're also traveling now. Do you see this very close or still?
Well, I hate to say it. I thought that was going to be so. I settled 8 wars plus. And I thought that was going to be one of my easier ones. Not the easiest. Some I settled in a matter of hours because I'm good at that stuff. You know, the United Nations should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing it, but it doesn't matter. It's got to get done, saving a lot of lives. We're saving millions of lives. With Ukraine, Russia, there's tremendous hatred between President Zelensky and President Putin. That's not good. That's not good for settlements. We know from dealing. There's abnormal hatred. With that being said, I think Russia wants to make a deal. I think Ukraine wants to make a deal. And we're going to try getting a deal done. We're getting, I think, Steve, I think I can say that we're reasonably close. But what happens is oftentimes we'll have a deal with Russia. Russia's set, and President Zelensky will not do it. You saw that when he was in the Oval Office. I was not happy. And then we'll have President Zelensky wants to make a deal, and Putin doesn't want to make the deal. It's a very difficult balance, and it's big time, and it is, you know, to use a word, it's a bloodbath. It's horrible what's happening It's a drone war. The drones are killing, thousands of people a week, thousands. We have to get it stopped. So I believe they're at a point now, I'm going to meet with President Zelensky later today. I believe they're at a point now where they can come together and get a deal done. And if they don't, they're stupid. That goes for both of them. And I know they're not stupid. But if they don't get this done, they are stupid. So I don't want to insult anyone, but you got to get this deal done. Too many people are dying. It's not worth it.
President Sisi is sitting on the first row here. He spoke earlier today and also complimented you on the Gaza deal. I think there will be a signing tomorrow. Of course, there are different views on this, but how important do you think this signing is on the board of peace? And do you think this is going to sustain? Do you think we now will see Gaza reconstructed and the billions of US dollars invested?
I do. I mean, I think we have peace in the Middle East. There are some little situations like Hamas, and Hamas has agreed to give up their weapons. Now, they were born with a weapon in their hand, so it's not easy to do. When they were born with a rifle in their hand. It's not an easy thing for them, but that's what they agreed to. They've got to do it. And we're going to know, Jared, over the next 2 or 3 days, certainly over the next 3 weeks, whether or not they're going to do it. If they don't do it, they'll be blown away very quickly. They'll be blown away. We have 59 countries that are part of that whole peace deal. And some of those countries aren't even they're near the Middle East, but they're not in the Middle East traditionally. And they want to come in and take out Hamas. They want to come in. They want to do whatever they can. There's a problem with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we'll see what happens there, but that's a problem. But there are these little flames, but there's peace in the Middle East. Now, had we not gone in and knocked out with those big, beautiful, we just ordered 25 brand new ones, the latest and the greatest, the B-2 bomber. Think of them, they went in there at 2 o'clock in the morning with no moon, no light, no nothing, and every single one of those massive bombs hit its target, 100,000-pound bombs hit its target, every one of them. And then on top of it, from a submarine 300 miles away, we hit the sites with tomahawks, which is an unbelievable weapon. So, we did our job. If we didn't do that, you would have never had peace in the Middle East. And the countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar could never have, and others could never have signed anything because you would have had this dark cloud, and the dark cloud was Iran with nuclear. Iran would, if we didn't take them out, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 months. They were very close to having the nuclear weapon, and we hit them hard. And it was a total obliteration. If they may try again, but they're going to have to try from a different area because that area was obliterated. Incredible thing we did. And because we did that, we were able to make peace. If we didn't do that, I would say, Jared and Steve, if we didn't do that, there was no chance of making peace because the countries I just named and other countries could have never signed off. They were afraid. They were afraid. We had a bully. The bully was Iran, the bully of the Middle East. They used to call it for years. They were the bully of the Middle East. They're not the bully of the Middle East anymore.
Mr. President, I know you even had to change plane last night, so I guess you didn't have much sleep, but I think but your energy is still there. I know you have several bilateral meetings. I know you're also hosting a reception. So thank you so much for coming back to Davos. Thank you so much. It's highly appreciated.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, would you consider a unilateral takeover? U.S. say you won't use force, but how the other means? You say no.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin. I am a reporter for the New York Times and CNBC, and also the author of a book called 1929, which to some degree may help set the backdrop for our conversation this morning as we talk about our economy today, but we think about it in some kind of historical context, and that may very well be to think about the 1920s, which doesn't mean that we are preordained to have a crisis, by the way, like 1929. We have an extraordinary panel here to join me in conversation. Larry Fink is here from BlackRock. Of course, he oversees now $14 trillion, and I should also mention is the co-chair of this year's World Economic Forum, and you've done an extraordinary job. Interim. Ken Griffin is here. Ken Griffin is here. He's the founder and CEO of Citadel. He oversees $65 billion investment capital, and he has been at the forefront of finance over the last several decades, and has been one of really the most prescient about where the economy has been headed, and we're going to talk to him in just a moment as well. And then we have European historian Adam Tooze here. He's also the director of European Institute at Columbia University. He's the author of 5 books, including The Deluge, The Great War, America and the Remaking of the Global Order, 1916 to 1931. So that will capture some of the period we're talking about. And in just a moment, Christine Lagarde is going to be joining us, and we are looking forward to talking to her as well about this. But I'm going to start with Adam, if you could, to sort of help us set the table, to give us some historical context to this moment, because there are some remarkable parallels. We are going through a remarkable boom right now. Some of it's technology related. There was a technology related issue then. There were all sorts of monetary issues then. Tariffs, which came a little bit later, but you can start to see what that looks like.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I do want to express my thanks to Larry Fink for putting on this Davos the way he has. It's been quite an extraordinary experience, a real privilege to be here. And yeah, I want to take up exactly where you left off, Andrew, because I think you're right. I don't think we should be in the business of doing automatic repetition type stories about history. I don't think that's how history works. Mark Twain's great line about history not repeating but rhyming is a useful one. And I do think there are various points in the 20s that are very pertinent to our current moment. One is the technological side. It really was a moment of a new era, especially in electrical technology, but also in mass production. So this is the era of Ford, quintessentially. This is when Fordism becomes a global phenomenon. And also a kind of social model. It's a high wage, high effort, high consumption bargain, which stabilizes, in the best case, high levels of consumption and the growth model of the 20th century. But I think more ominously, and I've really got Mark Carney's speech from yesterday, a really astonishing speech in my mind, is that one of the things we prefer to forget about the 20s is that it is, to most contemporaries, the first moment of unipolarity. This is the moment they think liberal power is triumphant. Why? Because the liberal powers won World War I. The 20s follow World War I, an epic revolutionary war, the first total war. And the powers that prevail are the powers that, in a sense, for a while still held the ring, and the end of whose hegemony Mark Carney was talking about yesterday afternoon. In other words, the British Empire, the French Empire, and the United States. 2 republics, the liberal empire par excellence, and Russia was their only ally, and it succumbs to revolution in 1917 and becomes a more radical power. And the basis for their power was money. It was finance. It was the dollar's hegemony in the 1920s that was supposed to anchor this world that was otherwise really fragile. So for me, the haunting evocation of the 20s is this was I mean collectively people like us's first effort at stabilizing the world, and we failed at the politics, famously, at Versailles and in the League of Nations. We thought that a good substitute would be technology and finance, and for a while in the 1920s that formula looked like it would work, because in the end the gold standard system became an increasingly dollar-centered system. And the hubris and the failure of imagination and the failure of politics never provided the underpinnings for that structure. That was not a moment I expected to have in my life, to be speaking about the 1920s and have Madame Lagarde appear on stage.
Little hubris.
But the discrepancy between the power of economics, the power of production, and the reliance on money, and notably the dollar, and the failure in that context to build deep political connections, for me, is really what the 20s stand for. And that is why, for me, it's so resonant in the current moment, because the crucial power here is the United States. The crucial power in the 20s was the United States. Those new technologies were American. The money that mattered was American. And it's America that essentially for domestic political reasons, defaults on its hegemonic obligations.
Madam Lagarde, I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. We're very happy to have you. And I would actually go to you if I could, just for a moment.
Wait, just now.
Just now. But I'll tell you why. Because you gave a speech back in the fall of 2024. And you said that you believed, actually, that there was a parallel taking place between the AI bubble in the 2020s and 1920s and 2020s. And you said, today, like back then, we are seeing setbacks in global trade integration at the same time as strides forward in technological progress. And we were trying to sort of put this moment in a historical context. And so I was hoping you could elaborate and explain what you meant by that.
Very happy to. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry I'm late, but initially it was scheduled at 9, and I had something really committed at 8:15, and I had to run from wherever I was. So, I trust that Adam went through the political similarities, divergences, and I don't want to venture there. What I meant in my speech, which was back in 24, so things have changed since that, and they have not changed for the better. What I meant to compare is the technological breakthrough that took place in the 1920s. Whether you look at the size and scope of the electrical grid, whether you look at the combustion engine and its developments, whether you look at the assembly lines that we're developing, those were technological breakthrough that took place in those years and decades. At the same time, you also had a stock market that was doing very well. And what we observed in the 20s, and maybe Adam, you went through that, is a significant change in the global trade. I wouldn't call it a collapse, but it went from 21% of GDP, roughly, down to 14% in a matter of a few years. So what we're looking at now is galloping digitalization of our economies, with a particular focus on artificial intelligence. We're seeing stock markets that are doing extremely well, particularly, well, not only in advanced economies, but also in emerging market economies. And we are seeing a fragmentation of geopolitics, more on that and to be continued, which is accompanied by an increase of the tariff, of the import and export restrictions, in almost all categories of products. So, and this is unprecedented as long as WTO observes those restrictions. We're not seeing yet the collapse of trade in the numbers that I have mentioned. No. Not yet. It's still holding. It's declining a bit, but it's still holding. Question is that going to hold? But the key point that I would like to make, if you give me a little more time, is that the big difference between the 20s and now, in a way, which makes the current situation more unpredictable and probably more icy. I just came back from this cold out there, so icy is a good word for that. Is the fact that those breakthrough of the 1920s could diffuse, to use a colloquial language, could diffuse within boundaries, within national territories. You did not necessarily need, in those days, the scale, the network effects that you need now. Now, if you ask the big Gs in digitalization and the big spenders in artificial intelligence, and just for memory, to develop a frontier model today requires about $1 billion. If you ask them what they need, they will say access to data as large as possible. They will say scale in order to really amortize the investment cost of the development of models. Now, that would be significantly jeopardized if we have limited access to data because of different privacy laws around the world, and more protectionist barriers that would prevent the scaling of these investments. Now, I might be having an overly negative and pessimistic view of what we are seeing at the moment, but I think that's a real threat. And the development of AI, the gain of productivity that we hope for, is difficult to reconcile with fragmentation in terms of standards, licensing access. And I would contend that this can only be remedied by a degree of cooperation that is going to be a factor of willingness of people to accept and tolerate different paradigms, different cultural preferences, and different views of the world. It's difficult.
Larry,
Yeah,
speak to that, if you could, because I can tell you're thinking about it.
Well, I spent a lot of time on it, and I think what Christine said is a foundation of a major issue. But I would turn the lens a little bit. I think for the Western economies, if we don't cooperate, if we don't scale, China wins. There's enough population there. Privacy laws are obviously quite different there, and so the data that they can accumulate, which is giving them a dramatic advantage. And I think that's going to be one of the big overwhelming things. When people ask me, are we in an AI bubble? I said, I think there are going to be some big failures, but I don't think we're in a bubble. But that being said, I would much rather say that we need to spend more money to make sure that we're competing properly against China. And so to me, all the issues that Christine has raised, they're there, they're obvious, they're things that we need to be addressing. Right now, we're at this point now where everybody believes there's going to be a massive J curve of demand for that information from AI. The key to that is making sure that the demand only comes if technology is diffused for more applications, more utilizations. If technology is just the domain of the 6 hyperscalers, we will fail. And so to me, it is, and we don't have enough information yet, the key, how fast we diffuse it, how quickly is it adapted and adopted, to me are going to be the 2 key characteristics. The parallels for me for 1929 and evolving into 2029, to me the big 2 factors that are, to me, the limiting factors are going to be, can we grow our economies fast enough to overcome our deficits? That's going to be one big issue, especially with the rising deficits of the U.S. And the 2, the capabilities of the capital markets to continue to fund these investments, to make the Western economies having the capabilities to have that J curve in the adoption of technology.
Let me ask you, and let me go to Ken on this, and it's reflective, though, of something actually Larry's talked about over the past couple of years. Larry wrote a letter called The Democratization of Finance. That was a phrase used in the 1920s. There was a real effort to democratize finance, to raise funds from the public. There was a huge amount of debt that helped finance the decade. And I wonder how you think about this moment and sort of when you think about the systemic risk of this moment, the concentration of AI, the debt that's financing some of it. I know some of the hyperscalers obviously enormously powerful and have extraordinary funds, but there is also a lot of debt behind all of this that's sloshing around.
So, first of all, it's a pleasure to be on the gloom and doom panel.
Yeah,
We're not
doom. You know that.
1920s were an extraordinary period. As I said at the beginning, it's not preordained that it has to head badly.
The end note of the 1920s, which was, of course, the Great Depression, Andrew. So let's take a step back and talk about where we are right here, right now. The area of recklessness is the spending of governments around the world, who are all, with little exception, all spending well beyond their means. That's the recklessness of this moment in history. This is not a parallel to the 1920s in terms of the recklessness of the private capital markets. It's a story of the recklessness of government spending. Within the private sector, there's a huge question as to where AI will take us. And I was carefully taking notes and listening to what Larry has to say, or to what Madame Lagarde has to say, because this is one of the big issues of our moment. Will AI create the productivity acceleration that is honestly hoped for in Washington, and in the halls of government
When you
around the
look at it,
world
I mean, America's plan
as
to
a
slow
way
down
to
China hasn't
overcome
really worked as
the
expected.
profligate spending
China
that we're
had caught up
currently
very
engaged in.
quickly.
Like the world needs a savior. And the hope is that AI is the savior that we need for productivity. And the challenge with this is it may or may not be. We just don't know yet. Now, there's a tremendous amount of hype around AI.
The two countries now map out each other's choke point. They understand each other better, right? Because that eliminate a lot of uncertainty and eliminate miscalculation, right? They understand vulnerability as well as the other side's strength, right? And that eliminate that contribute to stability. And lastly, and I agree with Kevin, so one side wants cheaper imports, the other side want more exports. So you definitely see room for cooperation there. Yeah.
So before I go to questions, then it would seem, and maybe I'll get everyone else's view on this, is that the prospects of sort of a longer-term landing point, which is the topic that we're talking about, is not necessarily realistic. But what we may have is a series of small landing points of lowest hanging fruit in terms of maintaining a degree of stability, not just this year but beyond. Is that approach that you think that both administrations, both governments will take for at least a short term? Professor Allison and then Senator Jones and
in a word, I think yes. So I think landing point, as if we had a permanent place to land, is not likely. But I think I agree completely with my colleague that if we look at 26 and you look at Xi's agenda and Trump's agenda, and you look at the experiences that they had in 25, where Trump basically tried to crush China with 145% tariffs. So again, bully somebody that you can, and it turned out that Xi was not prepared to be bullied, and Xi tightened control of the supply line for rare earth products, threatening basically the American economy. And the two parties recognized we're entangled in a way that we're going to have to find a way to work together. And that's in the other realms of strategy would be called mutual deterrence. A mutual deterrence in which each of us can do significant harm to each other has a certain stabilizing effect. Remember, it's because each are threatening to do something pretty horrible.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I stand here before you to state categorically that Machiavelli is dead. For years, our thinking was distorted by the presentation of a false dilemma in the design of public policies, one in which we were supposedly faced with a choice between political efficiency on the one hand and respect for the ethical and moral values of the West on the other. As Professor Jesus Huerta de Soto points out in his work on dynamic efficiency, from that perspective, efficiency is not compatible with various schemes of equity or justice, but rather arises solely and exclusively from one of them, the one based on respect for private property and the entrepreneurial function. Therefore, the opposition between the dimensions of efficiency and justice is false and erroneous. That is to say, what is just can't be inefficient, nor can what is efficient be unjust. Actually, from the standpoint of dynamic analysis, justice and efficiency are two sides of the same coin. Without a doubt, the thinker who previewed this most clearly was Murray Rothbard, when he articulated the connection between the dynamic conception of economic efficiency and the realm of ethics. Rothbard considered it essential to establish in advance an adequate ethical framework to foster dynamic efficiency, given our lack of knowledge regarding the ends, means, and utility functions that exist in reality. So according to Rothbard, and I subscribe to this view even in my role as president of the great Argentine nation, only the ethical principles underlying Western culture can serve as efficiency criteria when it comes to making public policy decisions. Put bluntly, when public policies are designed, it is unacceptable from the standpoint of ethics and morality to sacrifice justice on the altar of efficiency. This commitment to values not only stands above economic efficiency, but even stands far above political utilitarianism. Thus, by setting aside ethical and moral values, we end up with policies that are not only unjust, but also lead to collapse, not only economically, but also socially, to such an extent that they could ultimately bring about the downfall of Western civilization itself. This is why in 2024, danger. In turn, in my 2025 address, I showed that the agendas and policies being promoted by various international organizations and fora were nothing more than a whole set of socialist policies, elegantly packaged to deceive people of noble spirit, who were full of good intentions, but this always led to the same catastrophic results. That is why we must never forget the words of Thomas Sowell on socialism, of which he acknowledged the merit that it sounds very appealing, but whose flip side is that it always ends badly, appallingly badly. In fact, and beyond the continuous disasters caused by socialism throughout the 20th century, we can see the terrible damage done in Venezuela. Not only 80% collapse in GDP, but something far worse still, namely the establishment of a bloody narco-dictatorship whose terrorist tentacles spread across our entire continent in the Americas. Therefore, today more than ever, in the face of the ethical and moral degradation afflicting the West as a result of embracing the new socialist agenda, it is necessary to once again promote the ideas of freedom. However, unlike the way this was approached in the past, based on a utilitarian framework, today the defense of the free enterprise capitalist system must be grounded in its ethical and moral virtue. As Israel Kirzner points out, today's socialists do not deny capitalism's superiority in terms of productivity. They challenge capitalism on the grounds that it's unjust. Therefore, it's not enough for the system to be more productive, because if its roots were unjust, capitalism should not be defended. Today, I will demonstrate that free enterprise capitalism is not only more productive, but also that it's the only just system. I will also demonstrate that there is no dilemma between political utilitarianism and policy-making based on values. Because if the two were in conflict, that would imply that the foundations of political utilitarianism should be discarded as unjust. Therefore, this will mean that if we wish to emerge from our dark present, we must once again draw inspiration from Greek philosophy, embrace Roman law, and return to Judeo-Christian values, thereby enabling us to save the West. A large share of human conflicts arise from a failed interaction between natural law and positive law. Natural law is the law that ought to govern human beings because it accords with the nature, and it is therefore just in a universal sense. It is a law common to all men because it is intrinsic to their essence and therefore unchangeable and immutable. By contrast, positive law is the law written by human beings to govern according to their convenience. Thus, when positive law is in harmony with natural law, there will be justice. Otherwise, the law may be legal but not legitimate. Accordingly, two fundamental rights are recognized: the right to life and the right to liberty. Man is born alive and free and has the right to preserve these attributes of nature. He also has the right to demand that others respect them in order to pursue his own happiness, which is the end towards which every human being tends. Alongside these, we have acquired rights, which are neither natural nor inherent to human beings, but are instead earned through merit or obtained as a gift. Thus, from the fundamental right to liberty derives the acquired right to private property, which is manifested in our ability to freely acquire goods with the fruits of our labor, or to receive assets that are freely donated or inherited. In turn, the right to property, especially because of its dynamic consequences, is linked to Locke's principle of appropriation. So property may not only derive from donation, gift, inheritance, and/or exchange, but also from appropriation through discovery and creation. Finally, these rights are complemented by the non-aggression principle, which establishes that no human being has the right to inflict aggression of any kind on another human being. This includes not only physical aggression, but also all forms of coercion, compulsion, and/or imposition under the threat of force. Hence, we define libertarian liberalism, in line with Alberto Benegas Lynch Jr., as unrestricted respect for the life project of others, based on the principle of non-aggression and in defense of the right to life, liberty, and property, whose institutions cooperation. Naturally, associated with this social order, the question arises as to whether it is just. Therefore, in order to determine whether the system is just, the necessary reference is Ulpian, whose basic premise constitutes the foundation of Roman law and is undoubtedly one of the pillars of Western civilization. Thus, justice is the constant and perpetual will to give to each his due. That is, the intention to give to each their own, what belongs to them. However, Ulpian's statement did not end there. He went on to add that the principles of law consist in living honorably, harming no one, and giving to each their own. Therefore, from all of this, it follows that one of the defining characteristics of free enterprise capitalism is that it is a just doctrine. Given the emergent institutional framework, which we have also shown to be just, it is now time to demonstrate that it's also efficient. The first formulation in this regard was put forward by Adam Smith, who, by using the argument of the invisible hand, posited that each individual, in pursuing their own interest, maximized social welfare. Later, the neoclassicals, guided by an idea of the invisible hand based on the Pareto optimum, derived the first fundamental theorem of welfare economics, namely that every competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimal. However, this required embracing a mathematical structure that left the door open to state intervention under the well-intentioned goal of correcting market failures, which, from my perspective, do not really exist. To address this, the proof developed by Hans Hermann Hoppe, based on property rights in line with Locke's principle of original appropriation, together with the non-aggression principle, not only proves satisfactory in establishing optimality, but also leaves no room for intervention. In this regard, Hoppe states, any deviation from this set of rules implies, by definition, a redistribution of property titles, and thus of income, from producer users and contracting parties to non-producer users and non-contracting parties. Consequently, any such deviation implies that there will be relatively less original appropriation of resources whose scarcity is known. And therefore, there will be less production of new goods, less maintenance of existing goods, and fewer contracts and trades that are mutually beneficial. This naturally implies a lower standard of living with respect to goods and services that change hands. Moreover, the postulate that only the first user of an asset acquires property rights over it, not the last one, ensures that productive efforts will be as high as possible at all times. Likewise, the notion that only the physical integrity of property and not its value must be protected guarantees that every owner will undertake the greatest possible value-producing efforts, that is to say, efforts to promote favorable changes in the value of property and to prevent or counteract any unfavorable change in its value. Therefore, any deviation from these rules entails a reduction in productive efforts at all times. Note that by relying on private property rather than on excess demand functions derived from optimization exercises, this approach allows an optimum to be reached without the need to use esoteric assumptions that later serve as justification for state intervention. This also avoids falling into the empirical absurdity of the second theorem of welfare economics, which posits independence between production and distribution, as if choosing between capitalism and communism were neutral in terms of outcomes. So, having demonstrated that the institutions of free enterprise capitalism, supported by natural rights, Locke's principle of original appropriation, and the non-aggression principle are not only just but also efficient, at least in static terms, it is now time to show that free enterprise capitalism displays these same properties in dynamic terms as well. As early as 380 BC, Xenophon pointed out that economists their wealth, while arguing that private property is the most beneficial vehicle for the life of individuals. Xenophon then went on to address the concept of efficiency from two perspectives. On the one hand, from a static viewpoint, he defined efficiency as the management of available resources aimed at avoiding waste, while highlighting the benefit of private property by stating that the master's eye is the best way to fatten his cattle. On the other hand, in his second definition of efficiency, Xenophon delved into the dynamic realm, noting that efficiency also entails increasing wealth. That is, increasing the available quantity of goods through entrepreneurial creativity, namely through trade and speculation. This latter criterion of efficiency is of fundamental importance for the study of economic growth, because unlike a static model that considers only what Robert Lucas Jr. defined as deep parameters, that is, preferences, technology, and initial endowments of resources, in the dynamic sphere, both technology and initial endowments can vary, and in fact they do so continuously as a result of entrepreneurial creativity. Moreover, the institution of private property deserves a separate chapter. By pivoting on it, the Austrian School of Economics, from Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, Kirster, and Hopper to Jesus Huerta de Soto, has demonstrated the impossibility of socialism, thereby dismantling the ghostly idea of John Stuart Mill that postulated independence between production and distribution, a form of academic deafness that led to socialism and cost the world the lives of 150 million human beings, while those who managed to survive the terror did so in absurd poverty. In line with the previous remarks and consistent with Xenophon's second line of analysis, economic theory has identified four sources of economic progress. First, there's the division of labor, which was illustrated by Adam Smith through the pin factory example. At its core, this is a mechanism that generates productivity gains manifested as increasing returns. Although its limit is determined by market size, the size of the market is positively affected by this process. However, it's also worth noting that this virtuous process is not infinite, and that its ultimate limit lies in the endowment of initial resources. Second, there is the accumulation of capital, both physical and human. With regard to physical capital, the interaction between saving and investment is crucial, highlighting the fundamental role of capital markets and of the financial system in carrying out such intermediation. On the human capital side, the focus should not be limited to education alone, but should also include the development of cognitive capacities from birth, as well as nutrition and health, basic elements for gaining access to education and the labor market. Third, there is technological progress, which consists in being able to produce a greater quantity of goods with the same amount of resources, or to produce the same output using a smaller quantity of inputs. Finally, there is entrepreneurial spirit, or rather the entrepreneurial function, which, according to Professor Huerta de Soto, constitutes the main driver of the economic growth process. Because although the three factors mentioned are important, without entrepreneurs there can be no production, and living standards would be extremely precarious. In fact, the entrepreneurial function is not so much focused on short-term efficiency, but rather on increasing the quality of goods and services, which in turn leads to higher standards of living. On this basis, what truly matters is to expand the frontier of production possibilities to the maximum extent possible. Thus, dynamic efficiency can be understood as an economy's capacity to foster entrepreneurial creativity and coordination. In turn, the criterion of dynamic efficiency is inseparably linked to the concept of the entrepreneurial function, which is the typically human capacity to perceive profit opportunities that arise in the environment and to act accordingly to take advantage of them. This makes the task of discovering and creating new ends and means fundamental, driving spontaneous coordination to resolve market imbalances. Moreover, this definition of dynamic efficiency proposed by Huerta de Soto coherently and appropriately combines Schumpeter's idea of creative destruction with North's concept of adaptive efficiency. Naturally, given the role of the entrepreneurial function, the institutions under which it develops are of vital importance. In this regard, both Douglas North and Jesus Huerta de Soto consider one of the key functions of institutions to be that of reducing uncertainty. So while North presents them as a set of humanly devised constraints that structure social interaction in a repetitive manner, Huerta de Soto considers that these institutions, conceived by human beings, emerge spontaneously from a process of social interaction without being designed by any single individual, and that they reduce uncertainty in the market process. So, as Roy Cordato points out, the appropriate institutional framework is one that favors entrepreneurial discovery and coordination. Accordingly, within this framework, economic policy should aim to identify and remove all artificial barriers that hinder the entrepreneurial process and voluntary exchanges. And given the decisive influence of institutions on economic progress, this directs our attention to the importance of ethics. As societies that adhere to stronger moral values and ethical principles in support of institutions will be dynamically more efficient and will therefore enjoy greater prosperity. Accordingly, the fundamental ethical problem is a search for the best way to foster entrepreneurial coordination and creation. Therefore, in the field of social ethics, we conclude that conceiving human beings as creative and coordinating actors entails accepting axiomatically the principle that every human being has the right to appropriate the results of their entrepreneurial creativity. So the private appropriation of the fruits of what entrepreneurs create and discover is a principle of natural law, because if an author were unable to appropriate what they create or discover, their capacity to detect profit opportunities would be blocked, and the incentive to carry out their actions would disappear. Ultimately, the ethical principle just stated is the fundamental ethical foundation of the entire market economy. So what we've just demonstrated is that free enterprise capitalism is not only just, but also efficient, and also that it is the one that maximizes growth. Given the conceptual framework of dynamic efficiency and the absence of a dilemma between efficiency and ethical values when designing public policies, it is of interest to consider their implementation in real life. Beyond the enormous achievements we have exhibited during these years in office, having eradicated a fiscal deficit of 15% of GDP, reducing inflation from 300 to 30%, lowering country risk by 2,500 basis points and restoring economic growth, with poverty falling from 57 to 27%, pursuing public policies guided by ethical and moral values, I would like to focus on the case of the Ministry of Deregulation, or, as we call it back home, the Ministry of Increasing Returns. This ministry is inspired by the evolution of per capita GDP since the beginning of the Christian era, and it is in the shape of a hockey stick. This figure arises from the fact that until the year 1800, per capita GDP remained almost constant, and from that point onwards, it increased 15-fold in a context in which the size of the population increased tenfold. In parallel, as GDP grew, extreme poverty fell from levels of 95% to 10%. However, this marvel implies the existence of increasing returns, which in economics are associated with concentrated market structures. And this is where the public policy dilemma between Pareto efficiency and justice arises. In Pareto analysis, increasing returns entail the existence of non-convexities returns, and with them, economic growth. Consider the effects caused by regulation around the world. The values-based view of capitalism holds that if such a position has been achieved through discovery, voluntary exchange, and without violating the non-aggression principle, there is no justification for intervention. Indeed, intervention constitutes a violation of property rights. And by punishing profits, the economy's potential growth declines. So intervention and regulation are dynamically inefficient because they're violent and therefore unjust. This is why, since we took office in 2023, we have carried out, thanks to the cyclopean effort of Federico Sturzenegger, 13,500 structural reforms, which today allow us to have a dynamically more efficient economy and will enable us to grow once again. That is, to make Argentina great again. Thus, the Pareto optimum is clearly called into question, and for that reason many consider that it authorizes the regulation of concentrated structures by assimilating them to a competitive model. But, as I said, this means killing increasing returns, with the unintended collateral effect of killing growth. Note that along these same lines, we can also address the issue of artificial intelligence, a tool that can be seen as the 21st century version of Adam Smith's pin factory. That is a catalyst for increasing returns and thereby a catalyst for greater growth and well-being. Therefore, the most responsible thing states can do regarding this issue is to stop pestering those who are creating a better world. Let me say it in a straightforward way. The most responsible thing politicians can do is to stop pestering those who are creating a better world. At the same time, I wish to point out that all fears associated with dystopian scenarios are nonsense. The answer is Adam Smith. The limit to increasing returns is determined by the size of the market. And finally, we must not forget that the implementation We must finally not forget that the implementation of these projects requires real inputs and financial resources, so expansion will be constrained by initial endowments. For those who may be interested in the theoretical foundations of these arguments I'm presenting, today Dr. Demin Reidel uploaded to social media the study we did together, which fleshes out the theoretical foundations to the fact that regulation kills growth. The omnipotence of government and regulations have the effect of destroying property rights, thereby killing increasing returns and leading to lower growth. Lastly, linked to this phenomenal future that lies ahead, the role of human capital is of vital importance. And in this regard, in Argentina, thanks to the work of Minister Sandra Petrovello with respect to vulnerable sectors, we have stopped giving people fish and have started to teach them how to catch fish, and if possible, hoping to encourage them to create their own fishing company. Finally, despite popular criticism, free enterprise capitalism does not undermine moral values. After all, economic progress through the mechanism of the invisible hand emerged from Adam Smith's moral sentiments, and the modern era owes its existence to what McCloskey calls the bourgeois virtues. In turn, thanks to the great work of Huerta de Soto in developing the concept of dynamic efficiency and its application in Argentina, we can be confident that the alleged dilemma between efficiency and justice is false. That is to say, markets are not only superior in productive terms, but they're also just. Therefore, public policies should be guided by ethics rather than by economic and/or political utilitarianism, which invariably leads to unjust, populist, and impoverishing solutions. So I reaffirm what I stated at the beginning of this address. Machiavelli is dead. Therefore, it is time to bury him. Moreover, given the deep link between morality and free markets, the latter make us better people. Thanks to dynamically efficient markets, we can simultaneously achieve economic progress, defend private property, maintain peace, attain social harmony, and strengthen the social virtues that are indispensable for a prosperous society. Finally, I would like to leave you with a reflection on this week's Torah portion. Parashat Bo describes the moment when Moses confronts Pharaoh, the symbol of the oppressive power of the state, to warn him that if he didn't free the Hebrew people, the final 3 plagues would fall upon Egypt. When Pharaoh refused, the plague of locusts came, which meant famine. Then came the plague of darkness, meaning the loss of clarity in decision-making. And finally, the plague of the death of the firstborn, which illustrates the fate of a society that denies liberty. The analogy with what is happening in the West today is crystal clear. For some time now, and for some strange reason, the West began to turn its back on the ideas of liberty. That is why in this same place in 2024, I stated that the West was in danger as a result of having embraced increasing doses of socialism in its most hypocritical form, which is wokeism. In turn, in 2025, I explained the mental parasites sown by the left in humanity. However, 2026 is the year in which I bring you good news. The world has begun to awaken. The best proof of this is what is happening in the Americas with the rebirth of the ideas of liberty. Therefore, the Americas will be the beacon of light that will once again illuminate the entire West, thereby repaying the civilizational debt with expressions of gratitude towards the foundations in Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Judeo-Christian values. We have a better future ahead, but that better future exists only if we return to the roots of the West, which means returning to the ideas of liberty. May God bless the West, may the forces of heaven be with us, and long live freedom, damn it. Thank you very much.
Filosófico. Y cumplí con el tiempo. ¿Por dónde está la escalera?
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this fantastic panel on tokenization. I'm Karen Cho, anchor of Squawk Box Europe on CNBC. Now, just to remind you how we arrived at today, it was a few years back. I was at a property conference in the City of London. I left the conference convinced that just about every physical asset would be tokenized at some point, would be buying a piece of the Shard, the Empire State Building, pretty much any piece of real estate was up for some sort of fractional ownership. But talk went quiet, superseded by AI fever. But it's readily apparent in 2026 that there's been a ton of work happening in the backdrop. We've got banks, we've got asset managers, crypto players, other innovators have been quietly working on the innovation. And of course, the Trump family not so quietly storming to the space, promising to bring real estate assets onto the blockchain and to tokenize Trump properties this year. Now, is tokenization on the cusp of a breakout year in 2026? Is it the future of global finance? We have a terrific panel, and just a reminder, you can get involved on socials, hashtag WEF2026. So on the panel today, we have joining us Francois Villeroy-de-Galhau, who is the Governor of the Central Bank of France, also ECB Governing Council member. Bill Winters, Group Chief Executive, Standard Chartered Bank, also International Business Council. Valérie Aubain, Chief Executive Officer, Euroclear Belgium. Brian Armstrong, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer, Coinbase. And Brad Garlinghouse, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Ripple. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, Governor, I want to kick off the conversation exploring why we are here today talking about tokenization. France has the G7 presidency this year. You've put innovative finance on the agenda already, talking about tokenization. Why?
Good morning, Karen. Good morning to you all. Let me first stress that tokenization and stable coins might be the name of the game really this year. If we had been in Davos 1 year ago, remember, nobody spoke about stable coins. And now it's very fashionable. I hope it will be still more important this year than Greenland, but we'll see. And let me stress that tokenization is for the better. I really believe it will bring progress in global finance, delivery versus payments, diminution of cost of financial transactions, etc. By the way, we don't know yet how far the use cases will go. If you look at the forecast for the volume of stable coins, including on the US market, the bracket is very wide, and it's interesting, because at present the use cases are concentrated on the crypto exchanges and a bit cross-border. I think it will come to domestic financial transactions, very significant. Could it come to domestic, quote-unquote, economic transaction, including retail? The jury is still out. But anyway, it will develop, and I think develop for the better. That said, there are threats. And as I am a central banker, let me insist a bit on at least I gave a speech 2 weeks ago with a triangle of threats and a triangle of answer, but let me sum up. The first threat is privatization of money. And loss of sovereignty for many jurisdictions. And we know this is a real fear, especially in emerging countries. But if we have only a currency in the future which is private, and let us be honest, which is issued by American issuers, private companies, then we will have a question on sovereignty. Here the answer is CBDC. And let me be very brief on what we do in the European field, because we are pioneers there. Everybody is focused on the retail side and the so-called digital euro. But I will insist more on the wholesale side, because as I said, the most important use cases will be wholesale on the financial. Here we develop a wholesale CBDC, and let me stress that the euro is completely pioneer. We will have this year, thanks to the so-called Pontes project, a pilot wholesale CBDC, first worldwide. And then we will have a so-called APIA project, more comprehensive, with a European ledger or a European network. But let me insist, and I will stop there, Karen, I don't want to be too long, that we still need a two-tier monetary system with public central bank money, which is the anchor, but which also private tokenized currency in euros and not only in dollars. And this is a question of stable coins in euros and or tokenized deposits. The jury is still out. It's up to European banks to develop and to choose. We could have both of them, be it stable coins in euro and tokenized deposits in euro, bank deposits. But if we have none of them, I would be a bit worried about sovereignty. And what I say for the euro area is still more important, as I stressed, for many large emerging economies.
Governor, a terrific scene set, and we'll circle back to some of those topics. But let's hear from Valerie next up, because you're a clear part of the infrastructure in Europe. You've been looking at pilots tokenizing Eurobonds, UK gilts, gold with partners. What does tokenization promise to achieve, and how transformative do you think it will be?
Well, I think tokenization is, we see that as an evolution of the financial market, of the financial securities market, in the sense that with tokenization, you will certainly be able to reach out to a bigger range of investors. You will give access to finance to many more people. So when we talk about inclusion, financial inclusion, I think tokenization definitely is part of the game. But I think it's also important for issuers, because if indeed you start reducing the time to market, you start reducing the cost of issuing, I mean, that also it's a benefit for the issuer side. Having said that, as the governor was saying, the use cases start coming. So I think we start seeing emergence of interest and volumes into the digital assets, especially on the security side. I think we have started an initiative with Banque de France to tokenize the commercial paper in France. I think for me it's a very interesting initiative, because it is the first time that we are really trying to move a full market, a full ecosystem on tokenization. Because today what is very difficult is that you have issuers, for example, who are willing to issue digital assets, but then the investors are not really coming on very fast, you know. So with this project on the commercial paper, it's 300 billion euros, so it's not small, but it is small enough to make sure that we can all learn the lessons and see how we can transpose this initiative in a broader sense.
Bill, let me come to you. You're on the record as saying most transactions will be tokenized by 2028. Are we really 2 years out from sweeping moves towards tokenization for transactions, or was that too optimistic?
I'm not sure I said 2028. I definitely said that the end state is one where most things will settle in digital form, and including real assets, but not everything, of course. We're, I think, at a major inflection point right now. I'm not sure no one was talking about stablecoins a year ago, but clearly it's gathering momentum. It's gathering momentum because we've made the leap in many fronts between the crypto world, where stablecoins are absolutely embedded, and the TradFi or traditional finance or fiat world, where stablecoins and related tokenized instruments are finding their way into the mainstream. I would say so far it's in pilot form in many sandboxes. It's initiatives like the wholesale Euro CBDC. There have been other earlier stages with ECNY, but not really using commercial transactions, the Chinese currency, in the same way. But this is the year when this is happening in scale, and I have no doubt, no less conviction than I did a year ago, that eventually all things will settle in digitized form. How we get there, I don't know. I mean, we as a bank, we're operating in 60 countries on the ground, another 60 that we deal in very actively, and that means we've got 60 plus regulators with 60 different regulatory regimes. So how we get from point A to point B will be heavily influenced by regulation, but it doesn't change the direction of travel.
We can pick up on the regulation point in a moment. In the meantime, Brian, you are one of the biggest advocates for tokenization in the room. You've talked a lot on CNBC about the institutional demand that is coming into the mix. What real-world problem does tokenization solve, and how does it promise to improve the future of finance?
Yeah, well, tokenization solves a lot of problems. I mean, there's an efficiency aspect to it. You can have real-time settlement, lower fees, but maybe the most powerful part of it is just democratization of access to investment in high-quality products. A lot of people have heard about the unbanked. There's actually an unbrokered segment of the world as well. There's about 4 billion adults who don't have access or any ability to invest in high-quality assets, like the U.S. stock market or real estate or whatever. So what tokenization can do is, it's just like you have an underlying unit of that asset. You now have a token that's one-to-one representative of that. The first version of this was stablecoins. That's another version of tokenization. So stablecoins have been growing enormously. We're now seeing that happen with U.S. equities, real estate. It'll happen with corporate paper. commodities, like all kinds of things will come on chain. And this is just going to allow the people of the world to participate in this engine of wealth creation, which most of them don't have access to if they're only dependent on their labor for some source of income. So it'll be a great boon for capitalism. It'll create more demand. When we speak with funds like at BlackRock and Apollo, they've said, you know, they want to tokenize every single fund that they have, and they just know that it'll increase demand for their products. So Coinbase launched a product called Coinbase Tokenize, which is helping institutions do this, and we're incredibly bullish on it. If I can make one other point, just to build on what the central bank governor here said earlier, you know, I do think that stablecoins are going to play a major role. I think central bank digital currencies can also play a complementary role. And, you know, people think about our current financial system as kind of sacrosanct and it's the only way to do it. But, you know, if you study the history of money, really, it's got created in like 1971 when Nixon went off the gold standard in the US, and we currently have the system where most central banks don't have any link to a hard commodity underneath. I think fiat currencies are going to continue to exist for a long time, but we're also seeing the birth of a new monetary system that I would call the Bitcoin standard instead of the gold standard. And in the crypto space, that is a return to you know, sound money and something that is inflation resistant, because democracies around the world, once we came off the gold standard, are struggling to balance their budget. They're all running deficits, and it's caused inflation in fiat currencies. And so there is a real segment of the population that is looking for a new system based on hard money.
Brad, on that note, there are lots of sound bites there, lots to respond to. You're already seeing the momentum. First up, tokenized assets on Ripple's XRP ledger surged over 2,200% last year. Just weigh in from your perspective.
Well, I think I agree with a lot of what was said here. You know, I do think the first poster child of tokenization was really stablecoins. You saw, as Brian observed, you know, massive growth last year. I think, you know, went from, in 2024, $19 trillion of transactions on stablecoins. Last year, in 2025, is $33 trillion, so about 75% growth. I think many in our industry would say that's going to continue. I think to the extent there's space between what Brian was just talking about and how I think about the Bitcoin idea of a Bitcoin standard, I look at that and I think it's much more of the marriage. You know, sovereignty of fiat currencies, I believe, is for many countries sacrosanct. Ben Bernanke spoke at a Ripple event many years ago, and he made the point that governments will roll tanks into the street before giving up monetary supply, giving up the control of monetary supply, which stuck with me as, yeah, that makes sense. And so at Ripple, we very much focus on building the bridges between traditional finance, as Bill was describing, you know, what we now call TradFi, and decentralized finance, and that has meant working with a lot of the banks around the world to kind of build those bridges.
Governor, you have to address this. Is the euro in danger from a Bitcoin standard?
No, I'm a bit skeptical, Brian, sorry to say it, about this idea of the Bitcoin standard. We left the gold standard, but the gold was only a technical mean. What is important is what you say, Brad, that monetary policy and money is part of sovereignty. And we live in democracies, and I think the public role is key. And if we lose that, really you lose a key function of democracy. That said, I always keep repeating that money, as long as it exists for centuries, has been a public-private partnership. You need a public anchor, whatever its form is. Remember, and silver and gold were sovereign assets, so it was on the public side. And then you had banknotes, and you will have CBDC. But anyway, the most important part of payments is in the private sphere, and this is the development of tokenized private money. But this tokenized private money must be regulated to inspire trust, confidence. And this is another danger we should treat, that tokenization could develop, if not safe enough, financial risk. With the multiplication of stable coins, which are very different, which are fragmented. This is the issue, Bill, you mentioned. And so we must have safe enough regulation. This is MiCA in the euro area. This is now Genius in the US, which is welcome. Because If stable coins are not enough, we could have the risk of a somewhat Gresham's law, you know, this famous one, that the bad currency is more used for transaction and the good currency, which would be CBDC, would be kept for store values. Right. So I think we are on the right track to regulate. We could improve MiCA, still more improve Genius, perhaps. And the question of compatibility you raised, we discuss it in the BIS. I happen to chair the BIS. There is a so-called Agora project, and we will discuss it in the G7 in the French presidency. Right. But regulation is not the enemy of innovation. Once more, it's a guarantee of trust.
It's fascinating that you say that. Brian, you mentioned a complementary role that you could play. Is there a complementary role in Europe when there's so much regulation and it is about the digital euro?
Yeah, I actually think these are very positive sums. So crypto just broadly is a technology to update financial services. So it's going to help with stablecoins and tokenized equities and crypto assets and trading. And by the way, borrowing and lending is also getting updated. So I think that crypto is very good for fiat currencies. It's very good. Bitcoin is good as a check and balance on deficit spending, because when there is a lack of trust, or people, from like in a U.S. context, if people are worried about inflation, or maybe in places like Argentina or Turkey or Nigeria, they are going to flee to the thing that they believe is going to store value more. So I think in general it's going to be very complementary, and like you said, I think it comes down to trust. And so if fiat currencies can maintain trust and not have the money printer kind of debasing everybody, then they'll survive. But if countries that have bad behavior on that dimension, Bitcoin doesn't have a money printer. The supply is fixed, and people will go to it in times of uncertainty, kind of like they did with gold.
The guarantee for trust is independence on central bank side. And we have a common mandate, and we are accountable to that. But sorry to say that I trust more independent central banks with a democratic mandate than private issuers of Bitcoin, which have a very useful role. But
Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol. There's actually no issuer of it. So that's in the sense that central banks have independence. Bitcoin is even more independent. There's no country or company or individual who controls it in the world. And so anyway, I think it's a healthy competition, because if people can decide which one they trust more, and I think it's actually the greatest accountability mechanism on deficit spending.
Bill, come in.
Yeah, I'd like to come back on the trust comment. We're talking about the trust in the instrument itself, which is key. And obviously, the trust and sovereignty are two conflicting objectives. And the Bernanke tank point is very real. That's very real. And I'm sure he's right. I'm sure he's right today as well. But there's also trust in the infrastructure. So for a monetary system to be effective, you have to have the instruments that work, and you have to have the pipes that work. And the people who are custodians of the pipes and the people who are the custodians, or the market that's the custodian of the instrument, need to be trusted by the sovereign entities. Unless sovereigns are prepared to give up power and go to a completely decentralized world. But that's not the way it seems to be happening, and I think we'll probably hear about that later today as well, in a very different context. Power matters when it comes to money. So the trusted entities in the financial system today are many. I'll put banks at the center of that, mostly because we've been regulated to the point of extinction in some cases. But we've been regulated aggressively on the back of misdeeds. So there is an embedded trust in the banking system, which is why Senator Chartered has been, I'll say, at the forefront of a few of these initiatives, because we want to parlay the trust that we can bring, we collectively as banks can bring to the system, and lever these fantastically powerful new instruments in a complementary way.
There's an element of trust, but there's also an element of momentum. We're seeing it in terms of the swing away to gold, which is now just a momentum trade as trust is eroded. Brad, do you want to come in on this and the element of trust?
Well, I certainly think momentum is a big part of this. And I think, frankly, I personally think the crypto environment, and stablecoins included, and even tokenization, momentum is so much on our side of that direction. And that's partly because you're seeing the U.S., the largest economy in the world, has been pretty openly hostile towards facets of crypto and blockchain technologies, and that has shifted dramatically, starting with the White House, but certainly, the work that the industry based in the U.S. has come together and helped elect a much more pro-crypto, pro-innovation Congress, and you're seeing that play out. So I think momentum is a big part of this, and continuing to make sure that we're playing into that in a nice way, but also demonstrating real results. Because look, if this is just hype, I think part of the tokenization topic, the main topic today, part of that is like we shouldn't tokenize everything just to tokenize something. There has to be a positive outcome of efficiency or transparency or some of the root benefits of being tokenized. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, it's a nice science experiment.
I'm surprised no one's throwing democratization of the market to me. That's typically the argument when we have some sort of innovative approach to an asset class. Valerie, do you want to come in on this and the perspective that you have? Because today, as we talk about real-world assets, there is a huge switch towards alternatives, and you're looking at what that means in terms of access to some of those products.
Absolutely. And frankly, coming back on the point on trust, we just wanted also to bounce back on that. I think also as the market mature, people are looking also for, trusted party who can really continue to bring safety for the market. But they're also looking for institutions which are bridging different zones, different pools of liquidity. And this is where a financial market infrastructure starts playing a role, because indeed we need to first see how the market is emerging, but then when we are starting to reach a certain level of maturity, then indeed having a financial market infrastructure which can allow interoperability between different pools of liquidity, but also with the traditional finance, has a lot of value. And to come back on your point about alternatives, it is indeed correct that the market is in search of investment products which are meeting more their needs. Maybe sometimes traditional finance has not evolved sufficiently fast to really attract those investors. And I do see as well tokenization, but also alternative, to be a way to increase the attractiveness of the European capital markets. Typically, we know that we have lots of European savers, but not investors, and having instruments which are really addressing their questions in terms of risk profile, but also in terms of access, ease of access, will certainly be good as well for the European capital market. So alternative tokenization, as you were saying, complementarity between the Bitcoin and the traditional finance, I think all of that, is good for the growth of the financial markets.
The attractiveness of the asset also in some parts comes down to yield. And it's funny, gold's been so attractive, but doesn't pay a yield. There's a fight brewing stateside around regulation, and I know, Brian, you've had issues with the Clarity Act, and now it's stalled thanks to some of your opposition. You've been talking about whether there should be a reward paid for some of these tokenized assets, almost like a dividend. Just explain that notion to us, because the Chinese are pushing ahead with a revamped yuan that pays some sort of a dividend. Why is it necessary in your view? Is it just pushing the agenda for Coinbase, or is it good for consumers?
Yeah, so the legislation in the U.S. has been making good progress on market structure, and I wouldn't say it's stalled. I'd say there's a good round of negotiation happening, and so I think that that's positive. What we shared publicly was that we want to make sure any crypto legislation in the U.S. does not ban competition for traditional financial services, banks, or traditional securities brokerages. And in our reading of the draft, that's what it did. It actually unfairly penalized crypto companies. We think they should be able to compete on a level playing field. And when there's competition, that's how the consumer benefits. And I think there's very forward-thinking bank CEOs like Bill Winters and others that have just really been leaning into this as an opportunity. They recognize change as, you can think of it as a threat or you can think of it as an opportunity. So the smartest bank CEOs are leaning into this. Some of their lobbying organizations in DC are trying to put their thumb on the scale and ban their competition, which I have zero tolerance for. So we're going to speak up if we ever see that happening. But yeah, I think there's two main reasons why, in this case, the main debate is around stablecoins paying rewards. First, it just puts more money in consumers' pockets, right? So I think people should be able to earn more money on their money, right? That's the high level. It's also about global competitiveness, though, like you said. China did just come out recently and say that their central bank digital currency is going to pay interest, okay? And then there are offshore stablecoins that are actually larger than the U.S. regulated ones right now, and they would love it if U.S. stablecoins were banned from paying rewards because it allows them to flourish offshore. So we need, from a U.S. legislator point of view, they should be ensuring U.S. regulated stablecoins are competitive. Same thing from a European stablecoin point of view. I hope Eurocoin and et cetera continues to grow. And we're in a global competition. We need to make sure that consumers benefit, and each country puts their interests first.
Governor, to that point, does the digital euro need to pay some sort of an interest?
No, the answer is no in our case.
Why?
No. Let me explain, perhaps with a somewhat philosophical remark on this apparent opposition between innovation and regulation. Because I'm a bit fed up with this opposition. Let me explain. There is this idea that Europe would be only on the regulation side and innovation only in the US. There is an apparent contradiction, I agree. But there is a common purpose in the long run, which is trust, and we mentioned it. Regulation without innovation, I am not interested. I say it to the central bankers, it would be status quo, statism, I'm not interested. But innovation without regulation, it could create serious trust issues. Financial crises exist, and they are born sometimes of misleaded or dangerous financial innovations. And financial crises have a very high cost. This is why we need regulation. So I think it's common interest to find the right balance. On this question of remuneration of stable coins and or CBDC, we have a look at the effect on financial stability on the banking system. I don't want to enter the US debate. We see where the interests are. There are also private interests. They are legitimate. But the public purpose should be also to preserve the stability of the financial system. In our case, CBDC, and especially the digital euro, is not intended to attack the banking system and its deposits. So we should be cautious on the transfers. I strongly believe in complementarity on public-private. And this has been the monetary system for centuries. It's a change of technology today, but it's not a change of principle.
Right. Brad, come in on this, because you're the innovator in the room, but you also believe in regulation.
Yeah, I think what's going on in the U.S. right now it is a classic dynamic of when you create new law, it's never going to be perfect. And, I think what's the dynamic within the industry and working with Congress has been kind of, I subscribe to the idea that perfection is the enemy of good, and you can't get to perfection. And so I think Brian's exactly right. We're as close as we've ever been in providing that clarity. As some in the room probably know, Ripple lived through a 5-year battle with the U.S. government being sued because of the lack of clarity. So we are very much an advocate of clarity is better than chaos. I think Brian's right. We are very close. I don't know if we stalled.
What about the rewards side? Rewards, dividends, interest, is it necessary on stablecoins?
Ripple doesn't have as much of a dog in that fight as others in the industry. And so there's others that have stronger opinions. It doesn't directly affect Ripple's business as much. I agree in some ways that, look, competition is good. And I agree very much with the idea of level playing field. Now, I also think a level playing field goes two ways, in that crypto companies should be held to standards that banks are, and banks should be held to standards that crypto companies are in order to compete. So I don't think that's a one-way street, that somehow Team Crypto gets to have, a certain pass in some way.
Bill, let's hear from the banker in the room. There's pragmatism. Money goes where there are returns and where there's the best option. Your bank also operating big corridors across Asia as we talk about digital yuan, as well as in Europe. So how do you see this playing out? Do any of these tokens need to have some sort of an interest-bearing element?
I think if I can be very simplistic about it, I think tokens are going to be used for two things. They'll be used as a medium of exchange. No particular need to bear interest for a medium of exchange because they'll be instantly transmitted, and they'll be used as a store of value. And as a store of value, they're much less interesting if they don't carry a yield. But there will be tokens that are called stablecoins. There'll be tokens that are called tokenized bank deposits, which will probably bear yield. And there are estimates. Everybody's got their own numbers. And maybe we'll get to $3 trillion of outstanding stock of stablecoins in the next 3 or 4 years. The bulk of that is going to be in developing economies where there's lack of confidence in the local currency, and stablecoins of whatever form, could be Bitcoin, will be used as a store of value. Bitcoin's quite volatile. Everybody knows that the US dollar is the US dollar. You like it, you don't like it, but you know what it is. So that money is going into stablecoins today. It may go into tokenized money market funds in the future if they're available and if they're bearing yield. Frankly, we don't care. As a bank, we don't care. We want our customers to get the best thing for them. So if it's the medium of exchange, we want to provide them with the entry point and the exit point. And we do that today. They like us for it, and we'll keep on doing that. When it comes to store of value, especially in emerging markets, got to be compliant. Right? I mean, there's probably a black market transaction someplace that gets that local currency out of the local currency into US dollars. Sometimes it's legit, sometimes it's not. That's always been an issue, and as a bank, we're a policeman. That's our job, is to try to prevent that. Unfortunately, banks don't prevent most financial crime.
Valerie, come in on this, because we've spent all week talking about European competitiveness, and if we're talking about different regulation, different approaches here, is Europe going to be left behind?
I'm an optimistic person, and I'm a European. So, I don't think that Europe will be left aside, but Europe has to accelerate. I think it's, and I think 25 has been a year where everybody realized that there is a need indeed for fair competition, for a level playing field, but also for acceleration in innovation. And I think there is a willingness in Europe to do so. And again, in my field, which is securities business, Euroclear as a global footprint, we have been on the issuance of digital assets about 4 years ago. We start also seeing the value of tokenization for probably collateral management, because one of the, I think the thing that we are really adding to the financial markets is liquidity. And if you can start, increasing the liquidity, the movement of the collateral management through different pools of liquidity, that will also again benefit the whole capital markets. Right. So to your point, no, I think Europe has to indeed innovate faster, but at the same time, I think there are a number of banks, there are a number of financial market infrastructure, there are a number of players who are definitely willing to be part of that game, and we will be at the rendezvous.
Just a quick one, Brian, before we open up to the audience. Is there a geopolitical element here? We've got so many stable coins backed by US dollars. You've got the yuan moving at pace as well. The reality of the future, there's more transactions in both of these currencies bypassing other elements. Does that have consequences for the relevance of, say, the euro and other currencies?
I do think that they're in global competition, absolutely. China, US, Europe, going down the list, Japan. I mean, in some ways, Europe is ahead of the US because they passed MiCA legislation, so they have comprehensive crypto legislation, while the US only has about